The story begins in an old abandoned building where someone approaches a guy named Xiang Zi, asking if he remembers his broken promise. This was indeed the case because the shy and awkward boy admitted that he had money. But the man didn't want to listen to him because things were very hard for all of them right now. The economy was falling, a crisis had arrived, and everyone was working tirelessly. Because of this, a man named Xiang Zi came to the guy as if he had nowhere else to go, even though his ruined and abandoned house could have fetched a couple of thousand. Suddenly, the man came closer and asked him to wait, explaining that he could, of course, pay his bills, but only with a deposit. The glorious young man obviously did not like this, and he strictly ordered not to cross the border, claiming that this land already belonged to him, and he did not understand what else he needed. The cunning and stingy man insistently suggested changing the tone of the conversation and reminded the boy that medical bills would not pay themselves. He asked the boy to evaluate his actions as a service he was providing him. An unknown girl appeared out of nowhere, shouting at the man to stop bothering little Tan and give him some more time. The guys kept looking at her, because they thought this girl was incredibly beautiful. Just amazing. This girl was incredibly beautiful, and also had a kind heart. But the guy didn't understand how she could date such a freak. I sigh heavily. The guy dreamed that sooner or later she would become his wife, but it seemed to him that during this time she would suffer greatly from such an absurd man. Lighting a cigarette, the impudent man said that since the guy's girlfriend had stood up for him, he would give him another week to pay off his debt. And then he threw the boy out altogether and kicked him in the soft spot. The guy really didn't like this outcome of events, because after all, this was his home. The man didn't like this tone of communication either, and he came closer to ask why he was talking to him like that. The awkward and clumsy guy just started making excuses, because of course he had no money and therefore no home either. Pompously continuing to smoke a cigarette, the man was glad that his client understood, and together with his girlfriend, they began to leave. The main character's name is Tang Feng, and he is a simple village boy. Because he was unhappy, he couldn't even eat a bite of food. The roof of his house was leaky. He didn't even have a proper place to live. It was pouring rain outside, and inside it wasn't much better, practically a free shower. He also didn't have a soulmate, because he was considered a toad, which is completely poor. Besides, if things continue like this, he will have nothing left except his family. But suddenly, when he hit the wall, he discovered something. The masonry on the wall began to crack, and an unknown drawing was visible underneath. As it turned out, it was a QR code that was hidden deep under the wall. Taking his phone, the guy decided to see what this QR code was. Using his old phone, he pointed the camera directly at the code and began scanning it. At that very second, a bright blue light began to appear from under the wall, illuminating everything around. Messages started arriving on his phone saying that the god of wealth, the immortal Yuan, and the moon elder had added him as friends. This truly shocked the guy, and he thought that his phone was some kind of newfangled model, and because of this, unknown people were adding him as friends. A notification appeared in front of him, which was in the form of a hologram, and he still did not understand what it was, thinking that it might be spam. In the newsfeed, the god of wealth announced that this year, the day of his temple's foundation had suddenly arrived again, and he wanted to ask the people if they knew what they would prepare this time. Tang Feng tried to think clearly, because he thought that this was a scam, and there were no gods and no gifts, so he decided to write a message to the god of wealth and ask if he could give him something priceless. Meanwhile, the god of wealth himself read this message and did not understand what kind of idiot was writing to him, because he didn't even have a clue who the god of wealth really was. The message was followed by a response from the god of wealth. He asked if the guy knew who he was writing to, and if he even understood who he really was. The hero was already surprised by what they answered him, and he did not understand who was actually answering him. Because God was attracted to some idiot, he wanted to know if he would tell him anything valuable. And then Tang Feng remembered that his aunt in the village had a dance in the people's square, and it was very fun. Nothing could be better than songs. That's why he decided to write to God that the best gift is a song, especially a folk song. At that very second, in another world where God lived, that same column appeared. But in the real world, this column immediately disappeared, and the hero did not understand where it could have disappeared to. The god of wealth was angry. He thanked the idiot who gave him this gift, because he was rightly told that he should not add just anyone as a friend. No matter what this idiot asked, he could do anything. Then Tang Feng decided to test the abilities of God, so he began to think about what to write. He thought for a bit and began to remember the conditions he lived in, which people were stalking him, and also the beautiful girls he really liked. So he asked to be turned into a rich man. After reading the message, God thought for a moment and wanted to consider whether the boy was really worth it. But then, he joyfully exclaimed that he would do it without any problems, and began to use his magical abilities. Meanwhile, the guy was overcome by some unusual feeling, and he felt somehow strange. It was as if he had a fireball in his hands, which glowed with bright and fiery colors. Then he realized that they were really talking about this handful of golden earth. It seemed like it was ordinary soil, but it was from the realm of immortals, so it emitted such a glow and was an unusual object. If God gave everyone hard currency money, he would have gone bankrupt long ago at this rate, so he gave him golden land. This answer at first outraged the guy, and he became very angry. Throwing down the earth, he shouted in anger that the god of wealth was a swindler and a fraud. Kneeling down, he nevertheless began to think about what God had said about the earth, that it was not from their world, and that he simply needed to do something with it himself. And then he decided to start with tomatoes and got to work. Having brought a watering can from home, he began to water the unusual soil in order to get some fruits. Indeed, in a matter of seconds, the plants began to flourish very quickly. Literally, with every second, the plant's height grew, and it turned into a huge tree. This really amazed the average person, as he had never seen anything like it before. After some time, the small tomato sprout turned into a giant tree with fruits on it. Looking at his house, the guy only thought that, fortunately, the roof was already gone. The tomatoes themselves looked a bit large, and he wanted to understand whether they could be eaten by an ordinary person. He decided to sell them anyway, but unfortunately, the market refused him, as they didn't accept summer residents, as they had to have the highest varieties for sale. Tang Feng tried to convince the man, saying that he should try such a tomato, because he really didn't want to take a bite, but the man was skeptical, because such tomatoes could only be grown with the help of GMOs. Suddenly, someone came up behind the guy and tapped him on the shoulder. An unknown person asked the hero if he really sells these tomatoes, and he said that this is indeed the case, and that he grew these little ones with his own hands. The man really liked these little ones, and he decided to bite off a piece of the tomato to try its taste. After taking a bite, he felt a strange feeling that he had never experienced before. His clothes flew off, and the taste was truly unusual and magical, as if he had plunged into a cool pool in the spring, and the aroma was such that it made his blood run cold. Because the tomatoes were really tasty, the director decided to buy them all, but the guy asked him to wait so that he could first tell him how much he was willing to pay for them. The director announced that he was ready to pay $10,000 for this batch, and was also ready to buy everything else that he would grow. Hearing this, the hero finally realized that today was his lucky day. Sometime later, a new message arrived on the bandit's phone. It was Tang Feng who wrote that he was giving back the $10,000 he owed, and now they had settled. The boy himself no longer wanted to get involved with a scoundrel like him, and also wrote about it. The scoundrel was alarmed by this message, and he wanted to understand where this sucker got so much money from. Was he really pulling some kind of tricks again? Then he had to go and see for himself what was going on there. His fellow poker players were against him leaving, because it looked like he was going to quit while he was lucky, and they were against it. Then the scoundrel decided to ask his girlfriend to take a walk to Tang Feng's house. Sometime later, events continued to take place in the main character's house. Everything was really going swimmingly for the guy. He had already repaid his debt to that ghoul, because he was incredibly lucky with his divine friends. Suddenly, the Moon Elder wrote that he had created an app called Red Thread of Fate and invited him to test it. Tang Feng also had such an app and wanted to check it out and see what was new. At that very second, a red thread began to emerge from the phone and wrap itself around the hero's hand, and he realized that he had exactly the same thread. Meanwhile, a beauty approached the house and asked if Tang Feng was home. Reacting instantly, the hero ran out into the street to ask the beauty what she was doing there. The happy girl said that she made dumplings. Xiangzi was worried about him and asked her to bring him something to eat. But it all looked like it was some kind of nonsense, and Xiangzi was definitely up to something. But the guy still couldn't refuse such a treat and took the food, thanking the girl for it. The red thread began to wrap around the lady's hand, and the unknown thread connected them together. The guy had a very strange feeling, and he didn't understand what this red thread was doing. Now their hands were intertwined, and they were both holding a container of food. The lady seemed speechless and blushed, not knowing what to say. Even more embarrassed, the girl began to say that she was very hungry and that they could go to his place to eat dumplings together. Upon entering the house, the girl was shocked to see that it was a state of ruin, that it had been standing without a woman's hand for a long time, and that it was a complete mess. But they decided to eat the dumplings first, and then the lady would clean up a bit here. When they opened the container, they saw dumplings that smelled incredibly delicious and were very appetizing. This girl had specially made some special dumplings, so she asked Tang Feng to come and eat with her. She literally started feeding the guy, asking if he liked it. These dumplings were really very excellent, and Xiangzi was very lucky because he got such a beauty. As it turns out, Xiangzi himself is indeed a lucky man, but the girl is not. The hero didn't understand how one could be so unhappy next to such an influential guy like Xiangzi, but the beauty thought nothing less than that he was nothing and not a guy. It turned out that he had nothing but problems. He would gouge out an eye or knock out someone's tooth. The girl had been suffering with him for 2 years, and there was no result. Turning to the girl, Tang Feng still wanted to ask what she wanted from him. But without waiting for an answer, the lady began to move closer and closer with each passing second, as if hanging over the guy. The beauty turned to the hero, as if she wanted to tell him something, and sat right on his lap. The confused guy thought that something was clearly wrong with her today, and it was probably connected to that red thread. She kept talking about how she would like a completely different life, but the guy thought that this was a bad idea for both him and her. The embarrassed and blushing girl literally begged him, but he understood that he could not take advantage of someone else's weakness like that. Coming even closer, the girl seemed to be trying to kiss him and began to reach for his lips. Tang Feng realized that he couldn't do that and pushed the innocent beauty away. He pushed her onto the bed and began to move even closer to her. Literally hovering over her, the guy looked at the beauty with an embarrassed gaze and thought about what to do next. Perhaps she is only with Xiangzi in public, but in reality she is unbearably lonely, and rather than watch her suffer, it would be better to take her and comfort her. Extending his lips to the girl, he only told her that he could make her happy. At that very second, there was a blow that felt like a slap. And it was indeed so. The girl slapped him with all her strength and asked Tang Feng what was going on, as if he had forgotten who was in front of him. Immediately after this, she began to leave, because she thought that this was some kind of misunderstanding. Grabbing her hand, the guy immediately realized that this couldn't be a misunderstanding, and then noticed that there was no longer a red thread on it. The unsuspecting girl didn't understand why Tang Feng was holding her hand, so she begged him to let her go immediately. The hero began to write to the lunar elder, frantically and anxiously, because he did not understand what was going on. It so happened that at the most crucial moment, the red thread disappears, and this is completely unacceptable. After reading the message, the man didn't understand who this guy even was, but the hero only asked him not to change the subject and to answer the question. The red thread is the thread of fate. Fate, as we know, is an unstable thing. Therefore, the action of the thread is strictly limited. The enraged guy started writing angry messages about how this thread was complete bullshit and that it was of no use. These messages truly angered the old man, and he decided to take revenge on him. This madman truly believed that the red thread was useless and that he needed to open his eyes because everything depended on it, and this was love for life, and no one could cut it. Tang Feng only replied that he wouldn't believe it until he tried it himself. The old man immediately decided to act, and since the boy did not believe him, now he wanted to see how he would sing when he sent him the improved thread. And indeed, the Moon Elder sent a skein of red thread. That very thread began to completely envelop the hero, and he realized that this was indeed that very thread of fate. Looking at the girl, he realized that he needed to tie the beauty to him, and then they would be together for the rest of their lives. Embarrassed again, the girl looked at little Tang Feng as if she wanted to tell him something. Taking the girl by the hands, he said that of course, he was ready to take on all the responsibility. At that very moment, Xiangzi, who didn't understand anything, entered the room and anxiously watched what was happening. And then, he exclaimed the main character's name with utter fury, because he was definitely going to kill him. About to deliver a strong blow, the villain began to swing his fist and aim at his enemy. The blow hit the target and Tang Feng fell to the floor. Only one blow was enough for him to lose this fight. The scoundrel kept wondering where the cutie was hanging out for half a day, but he should have gone to Tang Feng. The girl didn't understand what was going on and wanted to calm her boyfriend down. The bandit still wanted to understand what his friend was doing with his girlfriend, but the guy tried to justify himself, saying that they weren't doing anything like that. Having brought his comrades, Xiangzi could not buy such an answer, so he decided to take full revenge on him, because this scoundrel was thinking of seducing his girlfriend. Altogether, they began to beat Tang Feng, because they wanted to teach the guy a lesson. The worried girl, in turn, began to scream that her boyfriend had completely lost his mind, because she couldn't have anything to do with this little guy. Hearing this, Shangzi could not stand being silenced and slapped the girl on the cheek with all his might. And while the guys were beating him, he continued to shout that they shouldn't touch the girl, but should deal with him, since she had nothing to do with it. However, the villain decided to take pity and stopped his mercenaries to find out something. Because he wanted to know where Tang Feng got the 10,000 from and how exactly he got it, the guy only replied that in order to save it up, he had been donating blood all this time. This answer was unsatisfactory for the scoundrel, since it was unrealistic to earn 10,000 for blood, and therefore he asked him to be more honest, since he was a very bad liar. This question made the boy laugh, and he wanted to understand what Xiangzi really wanted from him. After all, who doesn't have little secrets in this world? Maybe he does. After all, he talked a little with a beauty, and thought that Xiangzi was a macho, but in fact, he is an ordinary fool. Listening to all this, the bandit still could not understand what the guy was trying to convey to him. Continuing to smile, he only wanted to tell the hero that he knew what secret Xiangzi was hiding. What? Even with such a juicy beauty, nothing works out. At that very second, the scoundrel grabbed the guy by the hair and started dragging him somewhere. This really caused the hero incredible pain, because the villain continued to drag him by the hair. As it turned out, this criminal brought the guy to the pig pen, but the hero still did not understand what Xiangzi wanted from him. The bandit hit the innocent guy's head on the ground with all his might and was about to do something terrible. Putting a giant knife to his head, he wanted to say that because Tang Feng found 10,000 so easily, he didn't even want to kill him, but he himself said that he would do everything for him. The enraged scoundrel shouted at Tang Feng to say goodbye to his life. The blade gradually began to descend towards the hero's neck. Even the pigs watched the process with horror in their eyes because they did not understand what was happening next to their enclosure. These events really shocked the girl, and she began to shout Tang Feng's name with a trembling voice to find out if he was alive. Luckily, the blade had not yet harmed the hero, and he decided to try to do something to save himself. Using a skein of red thread, he wrapped it around the pig's neck, for he had a plan to which he adhered. In addition to the pig's neck, he also cut off Xiangzi's neck, as he wanted him and the pig to be together. A moment later, the villain began to approach the pig, and she also turned her attention to him. Together, they began to hug and feel love for each other, because they wanted to spend the rest of their lives together. This amazed absolutely everyone, even the bandits' mercenaries, because they were amazed at what their boss was doing with this pig. Even the main character was shocked by what was happening, because he could not believe that this was really possible. The mercenaries began to approach their boss, wanting to quickly separate the couple. But Xiangzi did not want to give up, because he believed that his love with the pig could never be destroyed. Events continued to unfold the next day. Tang Feng was sitting in his house and thinking that he was finally finished with Xiangzi. He had plunged headlong into the abyss of passion, and now he definitely had no time for others. At that moment, the villain actually grabbed the pig, calling her a rose, and asked all his mercenaries to go to hell, because he wanted to run away with her and be together forever. Unfortunately, a sad fate still awaited the hero. After all, he was beaten up anyway, and now he sits at home without leaving, and the director has been waiting for his vegetable all this time, and he wanted to understand what he should do. To begin with, Tang Feng decided to try calling the director to find out if he was expecting a new shipment of vegetables. Looking at his phone, the guy discovered something very interesting. There were updates from his friends. He truly felt joy from what he saw, because it was exactly what he needed now. In one of his posts, Immortal Yuanchik wrote that he drinks the immortality pill every day and wants to puke, so he wants simple human candies, and his status indicated that he is crazy about human sweets. Tang Feng couldn't believe his eyes, because the Supreme Leader had really entrusted Yuanchik with looking after the furnace. Who knows, maybe there is a miracle pill that will get him back on his feet in no time. Without hesitation, the main character decided to write to Yuanchik, saying that he had previously heard that the boy was not averse to trying something sweet. The boy began to doubt because he did not know who was really writing to him, but Tang Feng asked him not to talk nonsense and not to deceive him, because he knew everything about him. The naive boy immediately bowed down and called the hero the wisest, praising him. He asked not to say a word about the Supreme One, because he would kill him, because he should not know about the boy's weaknesses, because he could punish him in this way. Tang Feng said that not only would he not tell the Supreme One, but he would also teach him how to get sweets without descending into the human world. It was truly an incredible event for the boy, as he loved sweet candies in the human world very much. Now he gave him the most fashionable sweet, These were bliss lollipops, and Yuanchik was simply delighted. But you also need to understand that this candy will not be free, because the Almighty has a cure for all diseases hidden in his possession, so he asked the boy to send him one piece. The stunned boy thought that the hero was joking, because he didn't have the spirit to touch the thing of the Almighty. In that case, the boy found a way out. There is one pill, not very strong of course, but it can prolong life. Thus, Yuanchik sent a gift, which was called Small Immortality. There were 18 of these tablets in total. They looked very similar to milk chocolate, but the hero still decided to try them. Surprisingly, they didn't taste too bad, and the guy started devouring them. Suddenly, he felt some unusual effect, as if he was becoming a different person and his body was changing. Tang Feng began to feel the power of every cell in his body, as if he could control every molecule and atom. Now he became much stronger, and he doubted in vain, because his whole body was filled with divine energy. But it also seemed that at any moment it would explode, and at that very second someone knocked on the door. It was a shameless, insolent man who came with 3 guards and wanted to know if Tang Feng lived here. Tang Feng was indeed in this house, and he wanted to understand what the mysterious young man had come to him for. The boy decided to introduce himself. He is a representative of the Tanshui family. Rumors reached him that Tang Feng had sold the divine tomatoes, and his company's stock had skyrocketed, making their work difficult. The hero immediately realized that this guy was hinting that he wanted his tomatoes too. The guy smiled and simply said that this was not entirely true. In fact, they wanted to buy all his land and grow these tomatoes themselves, so the boy asked to name the price for which they could buy this land. The puzzled young man did not understand where exactly this madman was leading and asked what would happen if he did not want to sell his land. The little rascal shouted to his guards that if he didn't want to do it the easy way, there was always another way, and he could call his guards to take the land away. Experiencing intense fear and horror, Feng thought that he had nowhere to run from these bald guys, and the company that this guy represented could apparently only do so. Unfortunately, the hero was surrounded, and if nothing was done, he would be severely beaten. Looking around, he realized that he needed to find something with which to fight back. Taking out his fist, he ordered the guards not to approach him. The bald guards immediately wanted to pounce and kick the main character so that he would give up his land. Continuing to threaten with his hand, Tang Feng shouted at them not to come near him again. This threat did not frighten the men at all, and they still continued to approach closer and closer with each passing second to beat the guy. Suddenly, the hero used all his strength to create a powerful blow, and thus a blast wave was created that threw everyone around. The guard who was nearby began to fall to the floor, because he clearly did not expect that a simple flick could cause him such significant harm. The experienced and strong man began to scream in pain, as if he had been beaten by several dozen people. No one present could understand what had happened to him, or how it had happened at all, since the blow had been dealt as if by some kind of weapon. It turned out to be a booger, which caused such devastating damage that the man even fell to the floor with the booger right on his forehead. This truly amazed everyone, even the main villain, who continued to watch everything that was happening, and his jaw simply dropped. But soon, the naive man still shouted that Tang Feng thought that they were playing boogers here, and that they couldn't be scared by such tricks. The multitude of guards continued their attack, not foreseeing what awaited them. The brave hero, in turn, expected their attack and was ready to fight to the last man. Taking a booger out of his nose, he shouted at the scoundrels to prepare for their death. Thus, the hero, with the help of many boogers that were released with just his hand, was able to defeat several powerful guards who were physically much stronger. Each of the bugs that hit the scoundrels caused devastating and irreparable damage to their health, and they fell to the floor. As if hit by a hail of bullets, they began to fall into unconsciousness, although in reality, they were only being hit by boogers. Tang Feng was truly amazed by his own skills, because his boogers contained so much power, he didn't even expect such an effect from a small pill. At that very moment, an unknown person came in, saying that he was amazed by what he saw, because the youth was already breathing down his neck. A sucker is a sucker, but he already mastered secret techniques. It seemed that he himself would have to shake off the old days and join the fight. As it turned out, it was Uncle Huo, and the guy told him that this kid had gone crazy and personally killed all his guards. The main character didn't understand why the impudent man was complaining about him. After all, they came to him themselves, and not he to them. And this old man came from nowhere, and he should go his own way while his legs still move. Continuing to watch the boy closely, the old man said that if he could really harm him, He would be the first to express his admiration for the hero. Huo was indeed a difficult old man, and behind him a giant skeleton had formed, glowing with a bright blue flame, probably showing his strength. The dumbfounded guy couldn't understand at all where this guy got the skeleton from behind his back, and it seemed that this old man would really be more difficult than the bald brutes. The hero decided that if a fight was inevitable, he had to be the first and attacked. With astonishing speed, the bug began to fly straight at the grandfather, but he stood motionless in place, as if this move did not surprise him at all. It turned out that Uncle was able to catch the bug with 2 of his fingers, and thus repelled the powerful attack that Tang Feng had previously used. The enthusiastic uncle asked Tang Feng why he was so surprised, as he no longer looked so confident. The most famous killer in Shanxi province, the mentor of the Crimson Cloud Gang, was now standing in front of him. The protagonist's bugs are useless against Uncle Huo, and this might be the end for him. He felt his nose bleed and couldn't understand how this elderly man could fight without contact. In fact, this kid was so eager to get a bigger bug that he picked his own nose until it bled, and another cheeky young man asked his uncle to finally end this battle. Smiling, the uncle asked the flicker not to be offended because he was unlucky enough to be in his path today, and he should be prepared to take the blow. The lightning uncle came closer and dealt a crushing blow straight at the main character. The attack was absolutely straight to the chest, a powerful, well-aimed blow that hit the guy, who clearly wasn't expecting it. Watching the older man, the boy also realized that he was indeed incredibly abrupt. Since the guy liked this blow, the uncle was not averse to repeating it again. Once again, the old man tried to deliver another death strike, and began to run at full speed straight towards the young man to hit him. This time, the blow came straight to the head. The uncle decided to defeat the guy in one blow. But fortunately, Tang Feng was not so simple either, and he hit the impudent man right on the head with all his might, causing him to fall to the floor. He started foaming at the mouth, and it was clear that he could no longer fight. This outcome of the battle really amazed the young man, and he could not believe that his uncle was defeated by an ordinary guy. It felt like this old man hadn't eaten his porridge in the morning because the hero thought he was going to fight, but he was just being affectionate. At that very moment, Tang Feng asked the impudent man to call all the idiots he had left in his support group. But the scoundrel fell to his knees and began to apologize, saying that he was wrong and that he no longer had any complaints. Then the hero realized that it really is very cool to have gods as friends. Sometime later, the events continued at the Green Steps estate. Tang Feng brought vegetables to Director Liu, and it was truly amazing, because the hero not only knew how to grow giant tomatoes, but also other types of vegetables. As it turned out, the hero asked Immortal Yuanchik to get him the halls from the furnace in which the Supreme Lord prepares the pill of immortality. This, for varnish, turned out to be an excellent fertilizer, and the director agreed to buy all the remaining vegetables and at an even higher price. Sometime later, all the vegetables were sold, and the hero received a new message in the chat. The message indicated that Wang Tingting wanted to add him as a friend, and another new message was also received. When he saw who was adding him as a friend, the guy was truly shocked, because he could never have expected that it would be that same girl. The girl he had dreamed about for so long. She was one of the most beautiful girls in his city. The director immediately wanted to know who Tintin was, because the guy was able to exclaim her name. Earlier, he thought that something could work out between them, and now this girl wants to add him as a friend. These words really struck the man, and he realized that this was his ex, after which he wanted to know how their relationship was now. Everything was really great for them before. A month ago, they met for the first time. The hero followed her and said hello, after which he clarified whether her name was really Wang Tingting. The good-natured girl turned around and greeted the guy. She also knew his name and exclaimed it. This truly amazed the young man, because he could never have expected that such a beautiful girl knew him. Coming closer, Wang Tingting decided to ask who this guy was according to his zodiac sign. A smiling, kind, and sweet girl offered him to sit somewhere and talk. Then he said that he lived nearby, so they could go to his place. This proposal immediately surprised the girl, because at their first meeting, he had already invited her to his home. Overcoming his awkwardness, the guy wanted to know if she would like to come to his house. A little embarrassed, the girl still agreed to go, so together they headed to the main character's home. This girl was really very sweet when she smiled, and the director was amazed that they were doing so well, but it was unknown what happened next. And then they reached Tang Feng's house, and Wang Tingting couldn't believe that this was his house. The roof of his house was slanted, and all around there were only pitch-black ruins and piles of garbage. The girl really wasn't happy with the housing, and she capitulated, after which she said goodbye and never appeared in his life again. The good-natured director asked him not to be sad. Maybe she realized that relationships should be built on love, not on material values. The insecure guy couldn't believe that this was even possible, and that girls don't look at a man's financial status. The lady also decided to write. She remembered that they had not seen each other for a long time, and also apologized, because last time she panicked, that's why she left so abruptly. But she thought for a long time, and realized that relationships should be built on love and not on material values. And she also really likes him, so they can try to start all over again. Indeed, Tang Feng admitted that Brother Liu was right. The happy guy eagerly awaited every message and agreed to meet the girl. She was very beautiful, and he was finally able to end his bachelor life. The guy was also interested in what she had been up to for the last month, so he decided to look at her newsfeed. By logging into the girl's profile, the hero could only see the latest news for the past 3 days. But for one virtue point, he could view the internal newsfeed. What he saw amazed Feng. Previously, when he was looking at the newsfeed from the kingdom of the Celestials, he saw the real thoughts of the gods. It turns out that he now has the ability to read other people's thoughts. Clicking on the internal newsfeed, he began to read what Wang Tingting was actually thinking about. And her thoughts were such that, in all likelihood, Director Jin would never get divorced in his life, and it seemed that she would have to give up hope of marrying a rich sugar daddy. Years were passing. There was no result. It was time to come to terms with reality and marry a simple working man. On May 14th, there was another news item that was published in the internal news feed. Some idiot sent her 520 yuan. For her, it was just a joke, and she sent this money to Director Jin just for fun. The number 52. Oh, in Chinese sounds like I love you. So May 20th is Valentine's Day. The director immediately wanted to know whether that loser she had recently met had sent her this money. And the man was really smart. He also said that this was almost his last money. It turns out it would be stupid that this was a favor, but it doesn't lie on the road. And on May 8th, there was the first mention of the hero. It said that he didn't seem to have much money, but at least he was good looking, so she decided to go on a date with him, because it wouldn't hurt her. The angry and furious hero did not understand who this girl thought he was, because he did not expect that Wang Tingting would think of him like that, and took him for an ordinary poor man and worker. But fortunately, he still realized that this girl is not worthy of his nerves, and it's time to calm down. She considers him clingy and a loser. But the hero decided that he will not put up with this, and will take revenge on her. Well, no matter. She would soon see what the great Tang Feng was capable of. A little worried, he decided to turn to the almighty community of Celestials to ask them to tell him how to punish this mercantile girl. Suddenly, the god of misfortune added him as a friend, because he had something for the guy. The hero, fearing the consequences, did not understand whether it was worth starting a relationship with such characters. But then he again remembered that very correspondence in which he was insulted and decided. He decided that he had to act, because this scoundrel needed to be punished, because he was shaking at the thought of her. Meanwhile, events continued to occur in the Temple of Misfortunes. The god of misfortune asked his new friend if he really wanted to teach someone a lesson. If that was really the case, then he could take this potion. Thus, the god of misfortune Sandman sent 1 bottle of misfortune. This is a bubble of fate, and it was filled with misfortune, and he only needs the girl to inhale it. The more she inhales, the more troubles will happen to her, and her luck will move into the empty bubble. The stunned guy still wanted to know what God would want in return for his help. In fact, practically nothing. It was just necessary to fill this bottle with her luck, and then give it to God. Sometime later, events continued to take place in the restaurant. Tang Feng was already sitting and waiting for her, and the girl, meanwhile, was not in a hurry, and in her hands was a very expensive bag. She was truly surprised when the hero invited her to such a luxurious establishment, as if he had become rich during this time. The boy finally decided to admit that he had started a small business and had managed to make a little money. Laughing, the girl admitted that she had immediately seen great potential in him, and in her mind she understood that she had already resigned herself to marrying an ordinary poor guy. But he turned out to be quite a valuable asset. Literally a few seconds later, the hero began to take out a bottle, saying that at their first meeting, he forgot to bring her a gift. But today, he took it with him, so she should accept it in honor of their acquaintance. The bottle was very beautiful, and the girl really liked this gift, so she wanted to understand what was in it. At first, she thought it was perfume. Having opened the bottle, she began to absorb with pleasure the scent that came from the jar. The scent was really very pleasant, and she liked it very much. She sucked the whole bottle in one go. Yesterday, Tang Feng only opened the lid, but then his stomach was churning all night, and he spent the whole night near the toilet. The slightly surprised lady wanted to know what happened to the guy, but everything was fine, and he just wanted to call the waiter. First, the gentleman decided to find out what the lady wanted to try, and then he clarified that they cook excellent snails here. Suddenly, Wang Tingting seemed to start to feel unwell and began to cover her mouth with her hand. This behavior initially surprised the hero, and he thought that the girl did not like snails, so they could order something else. But it wasn't that simple. Wang Tingting got up from the table and said that she needed to go to the restroom. The girl, not understanding anything, went to the restroom and stood over the sink. And then she started coughing. With each passing second, the cough became more intense and her condition worsened, and it seemed like she was going to vomit. Sweat began to appear on her face, and her anxiety grew because it really was so bad that she could throw up now. Surprised, Tang Feng decided to ask the girl if she was pregnant. Turning around, Wang Tingting thought that the guy was talking nonsense because she was still a virgin. But then the hero noticed that a virgin could not have such a belly, and this was really extremely strange, because the girl's life expectancy increased 3 times, and it seemed that she really was pregnant. The worried and stunned lady continued to look at her belly and wondered if she was really pregnant. With a heavy sigh, Tang Feng was actually very happy with this outcome. After all, her affairs were bad. She invited him on a date, and she herself was pregnant, as if she had decided to find a sucker who would take her and her child. The girl became angry at what she heard and started shouting at Feng to shut up. The hero, not understanding anything, stood to the side and just looked at the girl, and all this time she wanted to understand whose child it was, and began to go through the options, such as Director Li, Director Jin, Director Wang. She didn't care, and wrote to everyone that she was pregnant and they would soon become fathers. But something unexpected happened, and she wrote to someone completely different from the director. This message was written to a general group, namely the work group she was a member of. So she also lost her job and didn't understand why she had to go through all this. Having called one of the director's numbers, the girl said that she was pregnant and also said that it was his child, after which she asked if the man was happy. But the man clearly didn't want to admit it, and asked why it was his child, because he knew that she had been having affairs with Director Li and with Director Wang, and then suddenly decided to pin everything on him, which is why they asked her to get lost. After which, the director immediately hung up, and the enraged girl could not believe that she could be abandoned so easily. It had been a truly bad day for her, and troubles were now falling upon her that she could never have even imagined. Sometime later, someone else called her and she decided to answer the call. The angry girl screamed at her dad that she didn't care, and it was his child, and that was it. It was none of his business who she was messing around with, but the child was his, and he had to bear responsibility for it, so he urgently needed to divorce his wife and then marry Wang Tingting. It turned out that at that very second, she called her mother and asked her if the girl really got pregnant from a married man. Her mother started screaming incredibly loudly and asking what she had been doing all this time, whether she wanted her and her father to never be able to wash away the shame. Wang Tingting started making excuses, saying that everything was wrong, and wanted to explain everything that was happening. But her mother didn't want to listen to her at all, and now she was no longer her daughter. Tang Feng continued to watch everything that was happening, and thought that although she deserved to be punished, this was already some kind of cruelty. Looking at the guy, she decided to ask him how he liked this whole circus. The discouraged girl continued to stand in one place, and began to think about what to do next. Looking at the bottle, Tang Feng realized that it seemed like she was going to have a hard time in the near future. After Ting Ting left, Tang Feng decided to work hard on his garden to distract himself from obsessive thoughts. The earth from the kingdom of the celestials brought more and more harvest. He began to bring the fruits and vegetables he grew to his sick parents, and thanks to them, they soon recovered and were discharged from the hospital. And on the day they returned home, another girl came, and I decided to ask Feng how they were doing. As it turned out, it was his sister, and Tang Feng wanted to understand why she suddenly returned. A moment later, a little girl jumped out, very happy to finally see her uncle. The little girl rushed into his arms, and the hero picked her up in his arms. It turned out that his sister had decided to bring her daughter to them for a couple of days, because she missed everyone very much. The father was extremely glad that they had not gathered together as a family for a very long time, and this event needed to be urgently celebrated, and it was necessary to drink. But the mother was against it, because the old fool had not yet fully recovered, and was already reaching for a drink. The man only symbolically wanted a drink, and asked the little girl if she really missed her grandfather. At the same time, the hero looked at his sister and noticed something very strange. There were several bruises on her neck, and he couldn't believe his eyes, because he didn't expect that there could be bruises in such a place. Coming closer, he asked his sister what kind of abrasion she had on her neck. Perhaps she could fool her parents, but not him, and she would not be able to deceive him, so he asked her to tell him what happened. It turned out that the whole problem was precisely the son-in-law. He lost badly and ran away. People came to them to collect his debts, and he became very afraid for his daughter, so she returned. These words shocked Tang Feng to the depths of his soul, because he could not believe that this could happen. Meanwhile, someone shouted for Tang Queequeg to come out. As it turned out, it was her husband and his mother, and they considered her a vile girl because she ran away to her parents' house and left them to be torn apart by bandits. The stunned parents immediately recognized their son-in-law's mother and wanted to know what they were doing there, why they were talking to their children like that, and where all this anger was coming from. Reacting instantly, Tang Feng asked his parents to take the girl into the house and stay there, and also not to worry, because he and his sister would sort everything out themselves. The embittered protagonist wanted to know what they wanted there and what his sister had to do with Li Hongshun's debts. The scoundrel's mother immediately screamed that she had a direct connection because she was his wife. His debts were also her debts, and money was being demanded from them, so they should return this money. The worried girl immediately said that she would definitely come up with something to pay off this debt. The impudent mother began to shout that there was nothing to think about here, and they needed to sell this land and house today. The guy really didn't like this outcome of events, and he didn't understand why they had to do this, and perhaps it would be better to sell their house. In fact, they no longer had a home and were living with their relatives. Hong Shun didn't even know what else they could sell to pay off their debts, and then he offered to sell his daughter to pay off the debts he had. Brother Tang Queequeg couldn't stand this and immediately took action. Approaching her husband, he asked what the hell he was saying, because if the girl heard this, she would be offended by him for the rest of her life. But her father could not think of anything better. The girl belonged to their family, and they themselves could decide what to do with her. Becoming even more angry, the hero wanted to hear how much money they were demanding from them, since he could pay for everything himself. The impudent man was immediately happy, because a sensible conversation had begun, and he could immediately say that he could pay. The total amount was 80,000 yuan, and without hesitation, Tang Feng agreed to chip in. Suddenly, in the notifications, he saw that the white spirit from the kingdom of the dead had received a new tongue holder, because the old one was rusty. If someone needed it, he could give it to them without any problem. This item was indeed curious, and now it came in handy. The download was successfully completed, and Tang Feng was now the proud owner of the divine tongue holder. The impudent man turned to the hero again, asking where the money was, as if he had changed his mind, because until he gave the money, they would not shut up. Hongshan continued to say that Tang Feng should not think of ignoring them any longer, because he had already agreed to pay, and they would tell the whole village what a liar he was. Because these scoundrels wanted to spread the family problems throughout the entire district, the hero did not hesitate, and wanted to see how they would handle it now. With the help of a brand new tongue holder, the guy confidently grabbed the scoundrel's tongue with a movement of his hand so that he couldn't talk too much. Thus, the villain's tongue increased in size several dozen times and was simply gigantic. The mother also did not understand what exactly was happening to her son. But after a moment, her tongue also became huge, and they simply could not talk, only moaned. Now it will really be difficult for them to chat with such tongues. In their place, the guy would have been better off hurrying to the hospital instead of standing here and waiting for money. The villains immediately started running somewhere and only moaned and shouted, and Tang Feng asked them to speak more clearly because he did not understand anything at all. The sister watched everything that was happening and could not comprehend what exactly happened here and how all this was even possible. The good-natured brother asked his sister to live with their daughter because while he was nearby, no one could hurt them anymore. A few days later, the events continued at the Green Steps estate. Tang Feng brought Liu a new product and asked him to take a look at it. These were huge fish that were alive. They were brought in a giant aquarium. The man had never seen such fish in his life. They were simply gigantic, although these were not the largest points. Yesterday, one of the gods posted a photo from the kingdom of the Celestials, and he, not being a fool, downloaded himself a bucket of water. After pouring the contents into the pond next to the house, the guy released several fry into it. And as a result, after a few hours, giant fish appeared, which amazed with their size. At that moment, he really almost shit himself. Brother Liu decided to let Popro Tang Feng stay with him for lunch today, because he wanted to introduce him to a certain tycoon. The polite guy decided to refuse, because he had to run home to cook something for his parents for lunch. Liu continued to shout for the boy to stop, but he had already run away as if he had never been there. The stunned man did not understand why Feng ran away as if he had seen a ghost. Behind the man stood a mysterious girl who asked if this was really the guy named Tang Feng. Sometime later, the caring guy was already at home and called his father and mother for dinner. A moment later, that mysterious girl came and exclaimed, "Does Tang Feng really live here?" The joyful guy exclaimed that it was really him and asked why she was looking for him. As it turned out, Liu Xuan told her about the guy's location. A little surprised, the hero could not believe that she really was that very magnate and wanted to know how he could help her. The boy even thought that the man had decided to find him a girl. The girl admired the fish that Feng sold and wanted to buy a couple of fish from him, but he promised Director Liu that he would sell his products only to him. They have a very trusting relationship, and if she needs fish, she can contact the Green Steps estate. The clever lady said that she came to him personally with a request, so he was obliged to give her the fish. This girl actually threw herself into his arms, as if there was clearly something wrong with her, and he continued to insist that this should be enough to sell her a few fish. The honest guy already said that he had an agreement with Liu and asked not to put him in such a difficult position. The upset girl started crying and wanted to understand why her friend was so aggressive, and this frightened her even more. This beauty is clearly out of his league, and it is unknown why she needs him, so it is better to stay away from her. And Tang Feng called his dog named Bagel to drive away the unknown impudent woman. The dog frightened the unknown girl even more, and she was in fear and horror, because she could be bitten by the animal. She started screaming throughout the yard and calling her grandfather for help. Suddenly, someone started clapping and with each passing second came closer to the scene of events. It was an unknown gray-haired man who had a giant ring on one of his fingers, and he kept saying that it was rare to meet such a principled businessman these days. The impudent girl began to tell her grandfather that he had set a dog on her and had also harassed her, but Tang Feng denied it, saying that it was she who had harassed him. The wise man asked them to stop arguing and start over, because it was time for them to introduce themselves. His name was Lin Tian, and his granddaughter was Lin Mengjia. Liu Xuan wanted to introduce them, but the guy ran away, and they had no choice but to show up at Tang Feng's house himself. And it was obvious that this old man was the tycoon. Lin Tian heard that thanks to his products, Liu Xuan's business had simply blossomed, and it was amazing. However, the grandfather also did not understand whether the guy really wanted to limit himself to just one client. The slightly excited boy wanted to know what exactly the old man meant. Lin Tian didn't want to be misunderstood, and he didn't intend to take the guys away from Liu Xuan's business, because they were longtime friends, and he wanted to invest 5 million yuan in his business. With this money, he would build a high-tech botanical garden. This idea really excited Tang Feng, because he heard on the news that this topic was very hyped right now, so he agreed to it. There was just one nuance. Unfortunately, the main character did not know what a botanical garden was. Unfortunately, it was impossible to explain all the details in a few words, but the man assured him that everyone would benefit from this, so he offered him to get into the car, since Liu Xuan had already prepared all the documents. Sometime later, the events continued in a giant black limousine. This car really amazed the guy, because it had a whole room with karaoke. Suddenly, someone started calling him. It was the beauty Sao, and she had some kind of unforeseen incident, so she urgently called the hero to come to her aid. Lin Tian immediately noticed that something was wrong with the guy, because after the call, his mood changed dramatically. Unfortunately, he couldn't go with them because something bad happened to his girlfriend. They all arrived at the hospital together. Tang Feng apologized for how things turned out, because the matter was very urgent and he really needed to get here. Luckily, the older man responded normally and asked not to apologize, as they would still have time to conclude this deal. Lin Mengjia at the same time did not understand why the guy did this. After all, they came to his village especially for this, and he runs away like some kind of idiot, as if he was given such offers every day. A wise businessman understood that he was willing to jeopardize the deal of a lifetime in order to help a friend in a difficult moment. This speaks volumes about his moral character. Such a partner is truly worth waiting for. The alarmed hero ran to the beautiful Sao to find out what had happened to her. As it turned out, Xiangzi got into a serious street fight and got hurt badly. Now he was in intensive care. The doctors said that the treatment would require 50,000 yuan. Unfortunately, the girl did not have that kind of money, so she called him. Then the hero began to think about the fact that this Xiangzi had always kept everyone in fear, and now he finally got what he deserved. If he died, Tang Feng personally would not cry. However, he was worried about the girl's condition, so he understood that he could not refuse her. Taking out a wad of money, he said that this was all he had with him, and that it would clearly be enough for the operation. Suddenly, someone took the money from the girl and snatched it for himself. These scoundrels said that the girl Xiangzi brought them money, and she is a smart girl, because this money will clearly be of more use to them. But the worried lady did not understand what they have to do with it. Scumbags like them walk on the edge of a knife all their lives, and her Xiangzi was the same. They are prepared for the fact that they can die at any moment. When the gang leader goes down, the young ones stick their heads out, and tide follows tide. That's how it was and will be. The worried girl continued to insist that she did not understand them, and wanted to know what they were going to do now. One of the impudent guys started saying that the girl was really stupid, because how could she not understand? They all wanted to divide his inheritance, and they were going to start with his girlfriend. Literally a moment later, a powerful framing blow followed in the face of the insolent man, which literally knocked out several of his teeth. As it turned out, this blow was carried out by brother Tang Feng to protect the defenseless lady. The angry bandit got up from the floor and wanted to know who this guy was who hit him so hard. But the hero himself was more angry, and he replied that he was his daddy. Many bandits began to attack, as they were ordered by their new leader, who took up his post after Xiangzi was injured. All the bandits already thought that the end would come for the hero, because he was the only one left, and there were many of them, and they were all incredibly strong. But they clearly didn't expect that Tang Feng was much stronger than they thought. Soon after, a multitude of blows followed, with the help of which the guy began to fight off the villains who were trying to beat him. The screams began to echo throughout the hospital and could be heard in every room. Some time later, the bandits began to bow down to him, saying that they would never dare to cross his path again, and asked for forgiveness. They all lay on the floor and begged him not to beat them anymore, and also to spare them, because they never intended to have anything to do with him again. Tang Feng ordered them to get out of here and never show their face again. The worried girl started crying because her boyfriend was such a freak, because he raised a whole gang of the same freaks. But then something happened that no one could have expected. The upset girl threw herself into the arms of her savior and thus wanted to receive consolation. Soon after, her mood improved dramatically, and she asked the boy to go home, while she herself was going to stay here. Taking out his phone, the hero thought that since he was in the city, he should meet with Jiang Mingming. According to rumors, he had recently risen significantly here. The happy young man called his old friend and asked if he was in town to visit him. But unfortunately, the guy refused him, because today he needs to go to the dealership and have his Mercedes E300L diagnosed. Unfortunately, he can't meet with him. Tan Feng didn't sense any trouble and asked his friend to go with him, as he was planning to take the car himself, and he could also give him some pointers. This request weighed heavily on his comrade because he didn't understand who this poor wretch was trying to show off to. He knew who Tang Feng really was in life, and if he was calling him, that meant he had no one else in the city, and he couldn't raise any money in his backwoods. And then, his friend finally agreed to help him. Now they will have to meet at the dealership. Walking through the outskirts of the city, the hero's eyes ran wild because there was so much in it, not like in his village. There were even a lot of cars on the street, and this amazed him even more. There were also many beautiful girls walking around the city who might not even be averse to meeting someone. Suddenly, someone stopped him abruptly and began asking about the things he was carrying with him. It was a police officer who explained that suspicious liquids were not allowed on the subway, so he asked me to take a sip for safety reasons. If the guy refuses, he won't be allowed into the metro. This bottle was filled with Tintin's luck. The boy nevertheless agreed and decided to drink the contents of this bottle so that he would be allowed into the metro. Sometime later, events continued at the Mercedes dealership. Once inside, the boy admired how many cool cars there were. Suddenly, workers everywhere started exploding firecrackers, as if it were some kind of holiday. In this way, they were celebrating some incredibly rare event that had just happened. One of the girls announced that she congratulated Tang Feng, as he had become the 999,009th client of their dealership. And now this SUV is his property. This event truly astonished the unpromising hero, and he could not believe his eyes that it had happened at all. He will be able to pick up this SUV today, and the woman asked him what color he preferred. A little excitedly, he only answered that he wanted a green car, because this color is associated with hope for him. Sometime later, Tang Feng thought that Wang Tingting's luck was not bad, although this luck was not enough for her to marry a rich sugar daddy. Suddenly, someone shouted the main character's name. It was his old friend, Zhang Mingming. They really hadn't seen each other for so long, and they said that the guy had found a pretty good job in the city. The old friend really didn't complain about his position and wanted to know how the guy got there so quickly, as if he had taken the subway. He also had a luxury car, a Mercedes E300L, which he bought for over 400,000 yuan, and he barely found the time to take it in for diagnostics. Until the mechanic arrived, the hero asked his friend to sit in the car for a while. The distrustful guy reluctantly agreed to this request. Sitting in the driver's seat, Tang Feng was stunned by what he saw, because everything inside the cabin was incredibly cool. My friend clearly didn't like this, and asked me not to fidget in the seat, because everything there was made of genuine leather, and nothing inside could be touched, because he doesn't know how to handle cars, and if something breaks, he'll never pay for it. But the hero himself had a counter-argument to this, and he took out the keys to his brand new car, after which he asked why Tang Feng assumed that he didn't know how to handle cars, since he was currently holding the keys to his own car. Feng couldn't believe his eyes and thought his friend was deceiving him, and that what he was holding was a lighter and not car keys. These doubts clearly did not please Tang Feng, and he revealed that these were real keys to a real car. And then he turned off the alarm on his brand new Mercedes, which was parked not far from them. The stunned friend couldn't believe his eyes, because he couldn't even imagine that such a poor man would have such a car. It was a Mercedes G65, and it cost no less than 3 million yuan. It was indeed his car, since he had just acquired it. Old friend abruptly fell to his knees and turned to his brother Tan, and he began to apologize for not showing him due respect right away, because he could not have imagined that Tang Feng would become such a respected person, but in fact, the guy just started a small business and made a little money. His old friend was indeed such a humble man, because they were from the same village. This should keep them together, and if Tang Feng had any problems in the city, any kind, he could calmly turn to brother Mingming, and he would easily solve everything. To be honest, the hero did have one problem, and it was precisely because of this that he came to the city. That's why he asked his old friend to find someone, because he knows many people in this city, and according to rumors, this person fled here. The person who needs to be found is Tang Feng's brother-in-law, who ran away from his little sister and abandoned his child, that bastard Li Hongshun. Sometime later, events continued to unfold at the Mercedes dealership. For Zhang Mingming, such a request was not a problem, and he could easily find any person the hero wished to find. Immediately after this, the old friend began calling Mr. Wang to find out where this son-in-law was. While his old friend was searching, the boy decided to check his newsfeed on his smartphone. But suddenly, he saw something that really surprised him. In the newsfeed, it was indicated that for the good deeds he had done, he would be awarded 20 virtue points and a through ball. Virtue points can be used to download items from the celestial realm and view the internal newsfeed, while the penetrating ball allows one to travel a certain distance through obstacles. The delighted young man did not understand why he was awarded this prize, since he had not even done anything special. The award was given for good deeds. But then he opened the page of that very girl, because he wanted to understand why he received this award. As it turned out, Xiao Jiaojiao was thinking that Shangzi had finally recovered from his critical condition, and it was really wonderful. Today the girl was trying to sleep. Apparently, without Tang Feng's help, this scoundrel would have died, but the girls will have to continue to suffer with him, and this is really not very good. At that very moment, Zhang Mingming exclaimed that he had news for his brother. It turns out that the influential young man managed to find a son-in-law after all. Sometime later, events continued to take place in a luxurious casino. It was an underground casino, and it seemed as if the emperor himself could live in it. But in reality, a village card club looked very wretched in comparison. Moments later, a mysterious girl approached, greeted Zhang Mingming, and wanted to know what had brought him here. It was Sister Jin, and the man recognized her immediately, and then he was completely delighted. All because he brought his best childhood friend, and the girl had one small matter. the mysterious lady was the owner of the establishment, named Mrs. Jin. The immodest hero immediately greeted them, and then said that he knew that his son-in-law Li Hongshun was hiding with them, so he asked to call him here. This turn of events was truly astonishing for the girl, because she had sent so many people to search for Li Hongshun, and suddenly one of her relatives showed up here himself. The son-in-law owed 400,000 wen plus interest, and Madame Jin immediately ordered that the money be paid immediately. But it seemed that this was impossible, because what amount would he have to bet to lose 400,000 yuan? But the girl was unwavering. She named the amount of the debt, and if he gave this money, he could calmly take his son-in-law. Confused and experiencing strong anger, the boy thought about where he could get that kind of money. But he couldn't leave his own sister without a husband, and the girl should have a father. I sighed heavily, but he still decided that it was necessary to go all in. Handing over the keys to his brand new car, he shouted that he had driven a Mercedes G65 and parked it. He puts it in a game against the owner of this establishment. Tang Feng is going to win back the money that her son-in-law owes her. Having heard such an offer, the girl simply could not refuse, because it was very interesting. Jiang Mingming immediately began to object, as if his friend had gone crazy, because this was her casino, and she knew everything here, and he didn't know how to gamble at all and could lose. The hero had no doubt about his luck, so he decided to go all in and play big, because with Wang Tingting's luck, he would win himself a Mercedes and pay off his son-in-law's debt. Sometime later, they gathered around the table to play a game for very high stakes. Since the boy was a beginner, the hostess offered him the simplest game, namely, more or less, you need to throw 3 dice. If the sum of the 3 dice is more than 10, it is more. Less than 10 is less. The bet will be 10,000 yuan. Having listened to all the terms of the game, the hero immediately agreed without hesitation. And then they began, after which the first player rolled 3 dice. The girl's professional skill was on a completely different level than the guy's, and she began to shuffle the dice. And then, with a slight movement of her hand, she began to juggle a container with dice. Having placed the container on the table, she still wanted to know whether the guy was betting more or less. In turn, the hero himself believed that there was no need to show off so much, and bet that she would roll a number less than 10. But everything was not so simple, and then the girl revealed her tactics and took out the bones. There were 3 sixes, and this sum is indeed more than 10, so she won. This outcome really shocked the hero, because he could not believe that he was really unlucky, and he realized that perhaps Wang Tingting's luck was not enough to win at the casino. The gloating girl exclaimed that the kid had lost. Tang Feng became even more indignant and began to deny losing, because the dice were hers, and she was the one who threw them, and he could not be sure that she did not cheat. Laughing at his guesses, the girl called him suspicious and asked what he was offering in return. And then, Feng decided to ask his friend to roll the dice for them. Unfortunately, his friend didn't know how to throw these dice, and if he lost again, then Jiang Mingming would also be implicated. But the hero himself believed that his friend could easily cope with this. As for the tricks, it's best to ask the gods what's going on here. But the security guard intercepted the guy's hand and said that it was forbidden to use electronic devices during the game. The worried man wanted to know if Tang Feng really suspected his mistress of cheating, and he himself reached for his phone. Thus, there was only one option left that was possible. The annoying guard continued to stand over the guy, wanting to know what he was going to do, but Tang Feng just wanted to drink some water, even though it was unusual. The owner herself also asked the security guard not to touch the guy, because he can do whatever he wants, besides using the phone. There is very little luck left in the bubble, but he still needs to return it to the god of misfortune, but he clearly has no other choice, because he still decided to go all in. Having drunk the bottle, he realized that now everything should go like clockwork, and the game would be a victory. Meanwhile, Jiang Mingming had already begun to prepare to throw the dice. As it turned out, it wasn't just the dice, and the hero turned out to be very stupid, because the girl can see right through you with her fan, and Tang Feng lost from the start when he sat down at this table. The hostess had everything in plain sight, and she could see the numbers that had appeared on the dice, namely 4, 1, and 3. Before the girl had time to say her answer, the hero immediately exclaimed that the value would be less than 10. Alarmed, the lady realized that this scoundrel had managed to shout before her. But it wasn't scary because she had a button under the table. She just had to press it, and the dice would turn over to the right side. Thus, the container that contained the dice was opened, and on the table lay dice with the numbers 4, 1, and 3. Fortunately, Brother Tan won this round, but he thought it couldn't have been otherwise. Realizing that the girl did something wrong, She began to think that perhaps her button was broken, or she didn't press it. Tang Feng, meanwhile, was glad of the victory. Now they had a draw, and they could change the rules of this game. The hero suggested that from now on, he would only bet on amounts less than 10, and the bet amount would remain the same. If more came up even once, then they would consider that the lady had won back the entire amount. The furious lady exclaimed that he had suggested it himself, and if he lost, he should not cry. In her mind, she considered him a fool, because even if he cheated somehow, one day the odds would still be higher, and he would lose everything. Becoming even more angry, she cried out for the dice to be rolled again, as she wanted to know the outcome of the next round. In the next round of the game, the dice rolled less than 10 and Tang Feng won. In the fourth round, the main character also won a victory. With each game, victory was getting closer, and each time the number came up less than 10. The stunned lady did not expect that this could happen, and did not understand why less fell out each time. Tang Feng's reaction to this was mediocre, and he wanted to ask his aunt if she wanted to continue, as soon his winnings would be enough to buy this casino. The girl, not understanding anything, took the dice away and said that she didn't believe them. And then she even started throwing the dice herself to find out what was going on in this situation and why they were winning all the time. A container with dice landed on the gaming table, and everyone waited to see what combination would come up. As a result, a combination came up that was less than 10. Worried and alarmed even more, the lady wanted to understand how this had happened, since she had thrown the dice herself, but for some reason they had fallen incorrectly again. The protagonist noticed that his aunt looked very tired and asked his friend to bring her a cup of cappuccino. Feeling very dissatisfied, the lady continued to believe that they were all scammers and that it was impossible. Enraged, she ordered all the guards to grab them to find out what the secret of this game was. The guy clearly didn't like this outcome, and he realized that he had to act, because this couldn't be tolerated. The worried comrade asked Brother Tan to say that they were not swindlers, because the aunt herself did not even know how to lose. Without hesitation, the protagonist released a multitude of cards, which began their free flight. These cards were aimed straight at the guards, and on their way, they cut everything they hit, even the clothes that were right on the men. Experienced and professional security guards began to scream in pain, because they did not expect that they would face such resistance in the form of playing cards. Even the casino owner herself took a knife and shouted that the main character was a bastard, and now she would teach him a lesson. Living in death, she pounced on him with a huge blade and tried to do a terrible thing. But fortunately, Tang Feng was also prepared for this, and he was able to easily stop the scoundrel and used 2 of his fingers to intercept the blade. This situation had really gone too far, but the owner still believed that he was cheating, and she would not allow anyone to cheat in his casino. But it was her casino, her dice, and also her gaming table, so there was no way he could cheat. But there are really big doubts about the hostess's fan. In any case, the one with more luck should win in this game. The stunned girl still wanted to understand how this was possible. Although she didn't understand how she could have been outwitted, she liked Tang Feng even more for this. Having calmed down a little, she still decided to take the guy to Li Hongshun. A few minutes later, they came to a dark room where the gambling addict was located. The man didn't expect that anyone would come to him, and begged him not to beat him, because he really didn't have any money to take away. The scoundrel did not look ahead and continued to scream so that they would not beat him. He literally begged and begged on his knees. Puzzled, Tang Feng saw his son-in-law and said that it was he who came here. In an instant, the villain's mood changed to a smile, and he wanted to understand how little Tan ended up here, and since he came to save him, then it was really great. With a sly grin, the hero asked if he really thought such a scoundrel needed saving. And the guy started yelling at him that he came to tear him to pieces, because why did he lose so much money? And also, who did he leave his niece and sister with? Now they are suffering because of him, and because of this, he is not a man. The man continued to insist that it was not his fault, because at first he had been very lucky. Begging on his knees, he kept saying that he just wanted to win more money for the sake of his wife and daughter, and he didn't know that in the end he would lose everything. The more he lost, the more he wanted to win it back. But the more he won back, the more he lost. All this was for the sake of his daughter and wife. Realizing that this scoundrel was pathetic, the hero ordered him to get up from his knees and stop crawling. The son-in-law wanted to know why little Tan was allowed in here, and then he said that he had paid off all his debts, and that was why he was allowed in here. What he heard amazed the man, and he was literally in 7th heaven, and considered the main character an incredibly handsome man. He also wanted to understand if the guy still had money, and if he did, he should give it to his son-in-law because he wanted to play again, and this time he would definitely win. Tang Feng got angry because of this and shouted that he had just freed him from debt and he was back to his old ways and didn't even think about his wife and daughter, and also thought that only the grave could correct this scum and that his sister would really only get worse with him. Sometime later, events continued in the interrogation room at the police station. Alarmed police officers heard that she, as if someone was in the interrogation room, had many keys on the keychain, so they were not immediately able to open the office to check who was there. Having opened the door, the men burst in because they wanted to find out who had illegally entered the police station, and they also ordered them to raise their hands up, pointing a gun at the scoundrel. As it turned out, it was the gambling addict son-in-law, who was tied to a board, and his mouth was also tied so he could not scream and call someone for help. Without a drop of regret, the hero left there, using his magical abilities to pass through walls. And the boy also thought that this through ball really turned out to be a very convenient thing. His sister shouldn't blame him, because there's nothing that can be done about Li Hongshun. He's gone. As a human being, let him be punished according to the law first. He probably knows all the underground casinos in the city, and maybe by working for the good of society, he'll somehow improve. Suddenly, the hero received a new message that truly surprised him. This message was written by the god of misfortune, and he wanted to know when his lucky bottle would be returned to him because several days had already passed. This message made Tang Feng even more worried, as he knew that all of Wang Tingting's luck had been used up and there was nothing left. The puzzled boy asked for a little more time, but God did not understand why he needed so much time, as if he had not filled the bottle of fate with luck. Then he wrote that due to unforeseen circumstances, he had to use it up, and there was no more luck left. This outcome truly shocked the god of misfortune, as he did not understand why Tang Feng did this. His anger knew no bounds because he wanted to give luck to the icing fairy for her birthday, and it was tomorrow. The enraged god decided to take revenge and was going to curse the protagonist so that he would know the consequences that could occur. The frightened and confused boy wanted to understand why God hadn't told him about this right away, because he didn't know that this luck had been collected as a gift. An unknown purple cloud appeared right in front of the guy. It was striving and was going to swallow him up. It seemed like this cloud was only visible to the guy, and he didn't understand what was going on here, although all the other people were calmly walking along and didn't pay any attention to him. As it turned out, the god of misfortune sent misfortune upon him, so now his life must turn into hell. Tang Feng quickly started running because he didn't want to suffer so much bad luck and wanted to fix everything, so he tried to escape from the scene. But unfortunately, he cannot hide because misfortune will pursue him even to the ends of the earth. The guy ran to the last, but found himself in a dead end. Now he is doomed and will know how to let the gods down. The frightened boy began to think about what to do and how to get out of here. He really had a great imagination, and he decided to get the bottle, because previously he was able to take in good luck from it, but before that it contained misfortune. He pompously took out a bottle, unscrewed the cap, and then began to suck into it all the misfortune that God had previously sent. After all the misfortune had gotten into the bottle, the hero decided to close the lid so that it could no longer get out. The idea was indeed a very good one, because in this way he was able to save himself from the eternal misfortune that could await him. God clearly did not expect such an outcome of events, and was shocked that an ordinary man could do this. The enraged god of misfortune began to scream, because he did not take into account that the vial of fate was still in the possession of an ordinary person. Now it was all over. For once he would be able to see the glaze fairy, and he would miss the chance to win her favor again. Unfortunately, he was born the god of misfortune, so he was never lucky. He also thought that the god of wealth lived very well. He had some kind of subwoofer out of nowhere. Such a gift was absolutely nothing to counter. Observing the god's thoughts, Tang Feng was truly amazed at how pathetic he was, unable to please the girl, and immediately became distraught. The built-in supernatural god wanted to know what people like him are called in the ordinary world. The main character shouted that such people are called losers and hangers-on. It was literally heard in another world, because the guy was shouting that the god of failure is a loser and a clingy one, and also a sufferer. Still, he decided to help him, because he himself had been like that before. And if he wanted to win the attention of the Azure Fairy, then he shouldn't waste all his energy on her. You need to look at your avatar because on it, he looks like a homeless person. That's why it was time to dress him up, and the good boy decided to send God some fashionable clothes. In a moment, God began to dress the new clothes that were donated by an ordinary person. Now, he was also wearing a fashionable watch that cost tens of thousands of dollars. The god of misfortune emerged as a completely different person, who was incredibly stylishly dressed and could seduce any girl. Now he became a handsome man in the heavenly palaces. And he doesn't need to worry about a gift either, because an ordinary person will help him with this. That's why he sent him an iPhone and AirPods. This gift is 100 times cooler than the subwoofer he gave to the god of wealth. God was truly pleased with such generosity. He was very grateful to the hero, so he wanted to know how he could thank him. Without thinking, the boy immediately asked for the vial of fate, and God instantly gave it to him. Also, with the help of magical abilities, along with the misfortune that is inside the bubble, he gave him the ability and skill to control it. Now Tang Feng can send misfortune to anyone he wants. This is truly an incredible skill, because now the hero can control misfortune. It turns out that now he is practically a sorcerer. The events continued to unfold the next day, near the green steps. The old friend was amazed that Tang Feng invited him to such an elite estate for lunch. This all happened because the boy did him an incredibly great favor. It turned out that the main character had previously brought vegetables and fish here, but had never gone inside. Everything in this estate was truly luxurious, like a palace. Suddenly, someone asked the merchant why he had dragged himself into the hall, since the entrance to the kitchen was near the back door. The joyful boy exclaimed that today he, their favorite supplier of vegetables and fish, had come to them, and that he had come here for lunch, and now they would eat a huge, handsome lobster. This statement truly surprised the girl, because she did not expect that an ordinary worker would want to eat with the elite. The smug girl immediately exclaimed that this was an elite establishment, and that you couldn't bring your own food there, and she couldn't understand where such uncultured people came from. The fact that the hero was called uncultured made him very angry, because uncultured people also need to eat. But his old friend asked to let him sort out this situation. And then the guy exclaimed that, in fact, they arrived here in a Mercedes G65, and there was no point in thinking that they had no money. At the same time, he was thinking that although the girl loved to quarrel, she was incredibly pretty. But the manager, named Liu Xiaoxiao, did not want to listen to the guys, because it was believed that they would not allow themselves to buy anything more expensive than water here. The clever Tang Feng immediately realized that this girl had asked for it herself. Since Director Liu hadn't taught his employees how to deal with customers, he would do it for him. Suddenly, someone cried out and called out to the girl named Meng Meng, telling her not to run away from him. It was a cute guy who was courting Meng Meng and wanted to hug her, as a sign that they were in a relationship. At the same time, the girl herself really didn't like it, and she wanted him to stop doing it, because she didn't love him. The manager immediately recognized the regular customer, because he was the grandson of the director of the Tianlong Corporation and the granddaughter of the director of the Fengling Corporation. The manager loudly announced that the estate was ready to receive guests and thanked them for their visit, which illuminated the green steps. The guys were shocked by this behavior and wanted to know what this couple had arrived in that the manager was greeting them like this. The attentive lady immediately noticed that Tang Feng was nearby, and she immediately turned to him, because she was glad that she was able to find him, because she knew that she would be right here. The guy, not understanding anything, seemed to be staring into space and didn't even know what to say. He only said hello. The smug boy asked Meng Meng if she had really come to this remote place just to find this country bumpkin. She really didn't like the way he treated the guy, and she asked Zheng Longcheng to be more polite because he was her friend and should be shown respect. Immediately after this, they started having a scandal, because the guy didn't understand since when she had been hanging out with such collective farmers, what people would think if his girlfriend had such friends. As it turned out, Meng Meng couldn't stand him since childhood, so she asked him to leave because they weren't even a couple. The main character decided to intervene in this dispute, even though he only had one question. Then the impudent fellow decided to shout that no one had given him permission to open his mouth, and he had warned him to keep Tang Feng away from his Meng Meng. The angry hero immediately exclaimed that he should stay away from her, because she couldn't stand him. The impudent man clearly did not like these words, and he came closer in order to find out what they actually thought about him. The rich young man wanted to find out from the collective farmer what he had told him, because Zheng Longchen believed that he could smear an ordinary commoner across the floor. The surprised manager immediately asked Mr. Zheng to calm down so that there would be no violence, because there was no need to cause such a scandal. Meanwhile, the friend watched everything that was happening and admired the girl. Then Meng Meng exclaimed that if Zheng Longchen didn't stop immediately, she would call his grandfather and then see what he would say. The young man clearly didn't like these words, and he became even more angry. Pushing his rival aside, he asked the girl why she was sticking up for this poor guy as if she liked him. It didn't take long for the girl to react. She came up and grabbed the hero by the hand. Getting even more angry, she shouted that Zheng Longchen had indeed guessed correctly, and she really liked Tang Feng. She also added that she was much more pleased to be in his company than in the company of a rich young man. The impudent man's eyes turned red, because he considered everyone to be bastards, and he wanted to finish off Tang Feng for seducing such a beauty. With a lightning-fast movement of his hand, the villain hit the protagonist in the face, and he fell to the floor. Zheng Longchen believed that he had already won this fight because his opponent fell to the floor, and Meng Meng was very worried about her newfound love. The indignant lady immediately considered her gentleman a scoundrel, as if he had gone crazy and was beating up everyone he came across. And then she finally decided to call his grandfather. Oddly enough, the girl called his grandfather and reported that his grandson was starting to attack people, and therefore it was time to seriously take up his upbringing. Meanwhile, Zheng Longchen looked at the protagonist and said that he could live for now. But from now on, he should look around because revenge will be sweet and unexpected. The lady really felt very sorry and wanted to know if the guy was really okay. But he really was fine, and he was also curious why such a frostbitten idiot was afraid of his grandfather. It turns out that his grandfather is the founder of the Tianlong Corporation and the main man in the Zheng family. Moreover, he used to be a military man and treats people strictly, so Zheng Longcheng is very afraid of him. The protagonist's companion was confused by what it meant to be from an influential family and wondered why Tang Feng didn't punish him physically, considering he knew what the man was capable of. The thoughtful young man admitted that this scoundrel was an old acquaintance of Meng Meng's, and this foreshadowed further problems. However, the woman noted that if Zheng Longcheng were even half as mature as the young man, he wouldn't have irritated her so much. At the same time, the main character understood that if he had given this scoundrel a good punch in the face, he would now be dining in the kingdom of the dead. A few minutes later, the cook arrived, exclaiming that dinner was ready and inviting everyone to the table. For lunch, there was an incredibly appetizing king crab, which the hero caught with his own hands, and also a spiny lobster, which was of incredible size, simply huge. This food was truly amazing, as even influential people like the old comrade and Meng Meng couldn't believe their eyes when they decided to try this dish. The delighted lady was the first to try a piece and was amazed by the incredible taste. Then it seemed to her that it was simply the food of the gods, because she had never felt so good from food. Jiang Mingming was also immensely pleased that his brother had prepared such a delicious meal. He now felt a lifelong obligation to him, ready to help in any matter, knowing his brother would do everything possible for him. This turn of events really inspired the boy, and he urged his friends to eat more, because he was pleased to realize that just a couple of days ago, these animals were very small. The girl also mentioned that her grandfather was fully immersed in the work of establishing the botanical garden, and she thought that he would soon contact Tang Feng again regarding the signing of the contract. This was truly encouraging news, because next time he would definitely not miss this moment. After lunch, everyone thanked their brother and began to disperse, while persistently reminding him that the signing of the contract was scheduled for Friday, and sincerely asking him not to forget about it. The joyful boy exclaimed that he would never forget this, after which he decided to go home and wished everyone a good day. Sometime later, Tang Feng was driving along a country road in his brand new Mercedes. As if nothing had happened, he whistled his favorite song while driving around in an incredibly beautiful car. And suddenly he discovered something strange, and it really amazed him. It was as if an unknown vehicle was approaching him, and with each passing second it was getting closer and closer. An unknown car began to ram him, and thereby turn over the brand new car. Unfortunately, this vehicle flipped the Jeep, causing it to fly into a ditch and begin to roll over. There was a very serious accident, and a brand new and very expensive car was lying on its roof. It was unknown what happened to the main character, but it was most likely that he was very seriously injured. Meanwhile, someone began to get out of the vehicle that had overturned his expensive Jeep. It was that same Zheng Longcheng who shouted that because Tang Feng wanted to take his girlfriend away, he now got what he deserved and got into a terrible accident. Luckily, the guy still started to get out of his wrecked car and was alive, gradually climbing out of the ruins of the expensive Mercedes, after which he exclaimed, "Why did Zheng Longchen tell him to look around? but then he realized that it was all because he wanted to kill him. But the villain had his own plans, and he was amazed that this guy was still alive, although he thought it wouldn't be for long. That's why he took out his gun, saying that it was really good that he survived this accident, because now he could commit another crime. After all, finishing him off with my own hands would be much more enjoyable. That's why the maddened Zheng Longcheng pointed the gun straight at the guy. And then Tang Feng understood everything completely. After all, this idiot drives an armored car and carries a gun with him. He definitely has problems with his head, and that is precisely why he will have to be taught a lesson. The villain continued to hold the gun in his hand, and thereby frightened the hero even more, keeping him in fear and threatening that he would shoot. But the boy was much more cunning, and began to say that Zheng Longcheng looked like a child with a water pistol in his hand, or he was shooting balls. But the hero also understood that it seemed that he did not even notice how misfortune was enveloping him, but he saw it perfectly well. The impudent man was amazed that the guy continued to show off even in the face of death. But since he wanted to die so much, Longchen would be happy to help him with this. At that very moment, the scoundrel fired his pistol, hoping that in this way he would take Tang Feng's life and take revenge for the fact that he almost stole his cheapie. But things didn't go according to plan, because the guy was dexterous enough to dodge a stray bullet that almost hit him. A very fast bullet managed to bounce off the wrecked car and continued along the trajectory of its shot, aiming somewhere into the distance. The killer bullet then bounced off the armored vehicle and headed in the other direction to hit the next target. Thus, the bullet was able to reach the shoulder of the villain and hit him right in the shoulder itself, causing incredible pain and even more anger. It was truly unimaginable, because the criminal did not even understand how the bullet could ricochet back at him, as if some magical event had occurred. He started screaming in pain all over the street, because it was truly unbearable. Because the bullet hit him right in the shoulder, the wound was truly significant, because it was a wound from a live bullet. Holding a pistol in his hands, the scoundrel began to shout that Tang Feng was just lucky, but he could not cheat death 3 times. The good-natured guy really didn't advise him to shoot again, because he already knew what would happen. Once again, Zheng Longcheng fired a shot, hoping that he would thus take the life of his opponent. But an unexpected situation occurred, and the pistol in his hand suddenly exploded, thereby enveloping him in a blast wave. As it turned out, the bullet that was supposed to fire exploded right inside the pistol. The main character actually warned him that it was better not to do this. So another enemy was defeated. He really couldn't even move anymore, because he was defeated by one of the strongest warriors in this area. Luckily, his vial of misfortune worked like a clock, and really did envelop all his opponents in a series of misfortunes. Sometime later, Tang Feng was picking huge fruits with his pet dog. Suddenly, the dog began to bark sharply, and was very angry at the person who came into the yard and started making a lot of noise. But in fact, it was not a person, but a giant bulldozer, which was getting closer and closer to the protagonist's estate with every second. The guy was indignant and couldn't understand what was going on and what exactly this bulldozer was doing there, as if they were going to build something next to them. It turned out that this bulldozer actually wanted to destroy Tang Feng's estate, and it started from the gate that led to the courtyard. He became even more indignant and did not understand what was going on, or what the hell was going on here. The sister was also confused and wanted to ask her brother what was going on, but the boy himself was perplexed and decided to go and find out the circumstances. The guy, completely perplexed, approached the impudent man who had done this and wanted to know why he was acting like this. After this, the worker operating the bulldozer announced that they were going to demolish the house. This made the guy even more furious because he lives here and wanted to know who ordered them to demolish it. It was Zheng Longchen, who had a broken arm, who then watched with complacency as Tang Feng's house was gradually destroyed. The unfortunate scoundrel continued to watch everything that was happening and smiled his vile smile. At the same time, Tang Feng did not understand at all how this scoundrel knew where he lived, but the villain persistently pursued him, not intending to retreat so easily. As a result of what happened, Zheng Longcheng intended to deprive the guy of his home and make him homeless. And all because this man planned to build a tennis court here for himself and a huge swimming pool next to it. Feng was truly outraged by this turn of events. His anger turned into determination to act immediately. He could not remain indifferent to such injustice and was determined to change the course of events. Coming even closer, he began to make threats. Because this scoundrel sought to destroy his property, Feng was determined to protect his land at any cost. As it turned out, the scoundrel managed to buy the entire plot along with the adjacent buildings. When the village council found out that he was going to invest in this village, they didn't hesitate for a second. Even Tang Feng's parents came out and were shocked that these workers were going to demolish their shared house. The father jumped out onto the road and did not want to allow it, because he had suffered deprivation all his life, only to preserve the land of his ancestors, and their equipment would only be able to pass over his dead body. Meanwhile, Zheng Longcheng continued to gloat, because he considered the protagonist's father an old dog and an incredibly pathetic person. If they couldn't drive over his dead body, then that's what he was going to do. That's why this scoundrel ordered the worker to demolish this hut and not pay attention to the old man. The confused worker didn't know what to do and told his boss that if he didn't stop, they would run over the elderly man. That's why the guy refused to do it. But Zheng Longcheng wanted to finish the job and threw out the worker's vehicle, after which he was going to crush the elderly man himself. The most vile person in the world wished death on all of Tang Feng's relatives and on himself. The bulldozer began its movement, and its bucket was aimed straight at crushing all the relatives and the main character himself. The alarmed father was shocked that this was happening and wanted to protect his beloved son with all his might. There was a bang and someone's hand struck straight at the huge bulldozer. It turned out that it was Tang Feng who, with his bare hands, was able to stop the bulldozer from moving any further. With great effort, he did everything to stop the powerful vehicle and prevent it from destroying his own home. The transport was also not the weakest, which is precisely why it was grinding with its tires, because at all speeds it was moving only forward. At that moment, Tang Feng realized that Zheng Longchen still didn't understand anything, because he would never be able to defeat a guy whose friends were gods. This skill amazed the impudent fellow even more, because he did not understand how it was even possible to hold a bulldozer with his hands. Continuing to control the giant transport, he wanted to see if the boy could save everyone in this way. The transport began to move in the other direction, and the winch continued to move in the direction of the mother. The frightened woman did not understand what to do and stood as if frozen with fear and horror. The guy started running as fast as he could, but he understood that he couldn't possibly manage to save her. Suddenly, something happened that no one could have expected. The most loyal and good-natured dog decided to save the woman and rushed towards her in order to push her away from the bulldozer, and she was not harmed. There was a very loud blow, and the dog began to scream in pain because the bulldozer hit him right on the head. Thus, the good dog flew away several dozen meters and was seriously injured. Unfortunately, the dog named Bublik lay down and couldn't move for some time. Everyone thought that something terrible had happened to him. The dog named Bublik really wasn't moving anymore, which meant that something truly terrible had happened. Slowly but surely, the main character said that unfortunately, their dog named Bublik was dead. Shedding his stingy tear, he regretted the loss of such a faithful and reliable friend as his friendly and sweet dog. Everyone immediately started crying, because they never thought that this could happen. The girls reacted most seriously to this loss and did not stop crying. At the same time, the scoundrel exclaimed, although he managed to kill their dog, it was not enough for him, and they were still not even. An enraged Tang Feng shouted that they had taken Bublik in as a puppy, and he was like a family member to them. But he never expected a moral monster like him to understand that. That is why the hero rushed with incredible speed to take revenge on the villain who did this. The freak continued to stand in one place and did not move, as if he was dumbfounded, because he was shocked that he was being attacked. Then he ordered the workers to give him a good beating and stop the attacker. But only Tang Feng himself knew how much power he possessed, and he considered the men who resisted him to be fools. With deft movements of his hands, he began to fight back, and wished for everyone to burn in hell, because they were on the side of evil. But one of the workers was more cunning and decided to attack from behind, preparing for his insidious attack. The brave boy could now expect anything, so he was prepared even for this attack, and made a counterattack against the villain. He kicked the man in the head with all his might, and he was knocked out, as he clearly did not expect such resistance. A stunned Zheng Longchen watched this carnage and wanted to run to his mother. He climbed into the bulldozer because he wanted to escape the crime scene and run away. Tang Feng didn't want to give him this opportunity and shouted that he would never be able to escape because this conflict had not yet been resolved. With convulsive movements of his hands, the villain began to start the car. Trembling with fear, he realized that the car would no longer start, as if it were broken. But as soon as she started up, Tang Feng stood right in front of her. The giant bulldozer began to move, and with each passing second, it was getting closer and closer to the innocent guy. The shocked young man looked at the giant bulldozer from below and did not know what to do in this situation. The protagonist, in turn, only wished for his death, and with an evil smile continued to move on a giant bulldozer to take his life. After a while, a strong impact occurred and Tang Feng began to fall to the ground. The immobilized guy could not say a word and even stopped moving, as if he had actually lost his life. His relatives were also stunned by what they saw and did not understand what to do or how to help their beloved brother. The lifeless boy lay on the ground and could no longer move, as if his life had really been taken from him. The villain began to gloat, laughing loudly. He was consoled by the fact that he had taken revenge on his enemy, and he shouted that Tang Feng had crossed the wrong guy and that it served him right. He was finally dead. All the relatives began to cry and continued to stand over the body of the main character, in the hope that he was still alive and would console them with his presence. All this time, Tang Feng's spirit was watching everything that was happening from the side, which meant that his soul was indeed no longer in his body. Flying above the earth, he could not understand what was happening to him and how it happened. The parents and sister continued to cry and hoped that their beloved Tang Feng was still alive. The agitated young man then realized that he had indeed died. Suddenly, an unknown voice said that he really did not understand everything, and now he should follow him. An unusual voice was calling him, namely a creature that only lives in another world. It was a black spirit from the realm of the dead who was calling Tang Feng to him. The guy understood that this couldn't happen, because he was only 22 years old, and he didn't even have a girlfriend yet, only just had his godly friends appear, and his new life had only just begun. The clever Tang Feng finally remembered that he had a full chat of gods, and he could somehow get out of this situation. With a beaming smile, he exclaimed that he had indeed been waiting to meet the black spirit from the realm of the dead. This behavior really angered the deity, as if this guy had gotten something mixed up, because the man was certainly dead and he was stressed, but there was no need to be overly familiar, and it was simply necessary to be a good boy and follow him into the realm of the dead. But the guy was not simple, and he exclaimed that this deity was confused, and he thought that he could just take him away to the kingdom of the dead. The slightly puzzled spirit did not understand how it could be otherwise, since that was what he had intended to do. The cunning Tang Feng exclaimed that apparently the spirit from the realm of the dead thought that he was an ordinary mortal, but in fact, he was an immortal Arhat. The Moon Elder, the god of wealth, and so on, they are all his brothers. And by the way, he was also acquainted with his colleague, the White Spirit from the kingdom of the dead. The shocked deity did not know how to react to this, and thought that the immortal Arhat was a lie, because the White Spirit did not warn him about this. Taking out the tongue holder, Tang Feng decided to prove that this item actually belonged to the White Spirit. To test it, the immortal deity decided to take this item and see if it was genuine. This thing really did turn out to be his, and the ordinary man decided to ask the deity if he believed him. And then the black spirit from the kingdom of the dead said that the White Spirit had just recently complained that he had lost his tongue holder, and it turns out that this is who stole it. The deity did not like this behavior, because he considered this guy a thief, and also a deceiver who wanted to imagine himself a deity. Without losing hope, Tang Feng wanted to lie until the very end, and was not even afraid that the deity wanted to kill him. It turned out that those same magic chains from the weapon penetrated right through Feng and did absolutely no harm. At that very second, the protagonist decided to call the deity here, so that he would look back and see what had happened. The black spirit from the realm of the dead didn't understand what the hell was going on here and why he couldn't grab this guy's soul. The wise and clever boy asked the deity to try again, because you shouldn't give up if you don't succeed on the first try. The object called the penetrating ball surprised the deity, because he had previously only seen one like it on the Golden Buddha. Could it be that Tang Feng really was immortal? But it was unknown why he had not heard of it before. Indignant, Tang Feng told the deity that he himself should have figured this out before, because the guy lives on Earth among ordinary mortals incognito on a special assignment from the very top, and such a low-ranking entity like him would still know about him. The dark spirit from the realm of the dead bowed down and stood before the great immortal Arhat, after which he apologized for his insolence, because being an ordinary petty bureaucrat of the realm of the dead, he can only hope for his leniency. The boy smiled and asked him to relax, because there was no need for such formalities, since everyone here was his own. The good-natured boy offered the dark spirit to add him as a friend, but the deity could not even understand how this was possible. A moment later, the hero came even closer behind the fifth and asked God to stand still, because now he would take his picture. So he took a photo with his smartphone, and the deity shouted at the immortal Arhat to take pity and take it away from him because he was afraid of mirrors. Tang Feng was still able to add the black spirit from the realm of the dead as a friend. This friend is dark in every way, even though it was not a mirror, but a phone. Since they had sorted everything out, the dark spirit decided to leave, after which he said that perhaps they could see each other again in the future. But there was also another question that remained unresolved, namely, the life of a dog named Bublik. As it turned out, the deity had already taken the bulldog to the kingdom of the dead. This statement really did not please the immortal Arhat, and he asked who he would ride on now. After which he ordered the dark spirit from the kingdom of the dead to return the dog's soul here immediately. The immortal Arhat should also know that 1 day in heaven is equal to 1 year in the afterlife. After his soul entered the realm of the dead, the Lord of Hell Yan Wang made his dog into a hellhound, and he wanted to know if Tang Feng really wanted to be transferred to the realm of the living, because this was a grave crime. The main character didn't care at all how he would do it, because he took the dog to the kingdom of the dead, and now he had to rescue him from there, because they had already become friends, and how could he refuse such a request? The dark spirit asked if he really wanted to know how many bureaucrats there were in the underworld, each of whom on his way would demand an explanation from him. These words provoked the protagonist to act, and he came up with what he could do about it. After all, in order to bribe these bureaucrats, he would need money, so he threw it out directly for the deity to do it. At that very second, the dark spirit did not understand why such a punishment had fallen on his head. In his upset feelings, he thought about the fact that he did not understand what he felt more strongly now, humiliation or joy. And if this money is not enough, then Tang Feng can happily summon even more money. There will be a lot more money that will literally fall from the sky, and there will be nowhere to put it. Because the immortal Arhat is capable of many things and is ready to do everything to get his beloved dog back. This behavior struck the dark spirit because this guy is pushing him to commit an official crime, and this is corruption. But it's worth looking at it differently, because he's been catching souls his whole life, and he needs to live for himself a little. That is why Tang Feng decided to give the deity a mansion as well, so that he would fulfill the requirements. Thus, now the dark spirit from the kingdom of the dead owned a gigantic mansion, which was impressive in its size. This truly amazed him, because he had never seen such buildings in his life. But the reward was not only this, but also a very cool car. Seeing this, the dark spirit from the realm of the dead believed that he really did not deserve all of this, namely a cool car, a huge mansion, and such a lot of money. Even a watch, Tang Feng would not hesitate to give to his new friend as a reward for fulfilling the request. Also, the new Nike Air Jordans that just came out and are sold in stores cost more than 10,000 yuan. And if the black spirit is lonely, then he can do all the work not alone. Because very beautiful girls can brighten up his loneliness if he can fulfill the request of the good-natured immortal Arhat. All of them are ready to fulfill any request, if only the dark spirit from the kingdom of the dead agrees to do what he was asked to do. One of the secretaries immediately approached her boss and asked if he liked her, even though she was incredibly beautiful and knew it. These girls were ready to fulfill any request of the master because they really wanted to stay close to him. And then, the dark spirit from the realm of the dead realized that he was indeed very weak. Shouting that he would never disappoint the immortal Arhat, the spirit began to teleport to the realm of the dead to return the dog named Bagel. A moment later, the good-natured dark spirit evaporated, leaving nothing behind. The secretary immediately shouted good luck to Mr. Luck, and they were already missing him. A cunning and smart guy watched all this, thinking that he really did what was right. For a lot of money, even dark spirits agree to run errands, and this poor fellow accepted his gifts as divine gifts. Although everything is really much simpler, because his father works in the funeral services industry. He can make everything out of paper, even those beauties were made of paper. Adding the black spirit as a friend, he simply sent him items from his father's page. If he manages to get Bublik out of hell thanks to a photo of cardboard products, then it will be, without exaggeration, the deal of the century. A moment later, the dark spirit emerged from the underworld and shouted to the immortal Arhat that he had managed to catch the soul of a dog named Bublik. The enraged Tang Feng exclaimed that he should never have come out so suddenly because his heart was about to jump out of his chest. But the immortal spirit was simply in a hurry because the guy couldn't even imagine how much effort it took him to fulfill this request. The hellish chain continued to stretch into the abyss of hell, and behind it stretched the dog named Bublik himself. Gradually, he began to emerge from the portal, which was created for teleportation. And out of it crawled a giant red dog, which was unrecognizable. The deities were truly amazed that a dog could change so much in just one day. In a state of numbness, they continued to stare at one place and looked at the giant red dog, thinking about what to do with it. But for Tang Feng, it was really amazing because his dog was now really cool. The dog immediately began to get angry and bark because it could not recognize either its owner or the stranger who was standing next to him. The dark spirit from the kingdom of the dead immediately asked the dog to calm down so that it would not bark. But she didn't like the fact that they talked to the dog, and the dog named Bublik began his attack. The spirit immediately sat down and became very scared, because he didn't know how to react to this and thought that the dog would finish him off. Tang Feng was shocked by these words because he believed that dark spirits could not die. As it turned out, the demigod forgot that he was immortal and asked the hero not to quibble over his words now. Realizing this, Tang Feng realized that there really was no point in picking on such phrases. He reached out his hands and called to his beloved dog, Bublik, asking her to come closer. The giant dog moved its paws, getting closer and closer with each passing second. It turned out that with one bite it could eat its former owner. The furious and hellish bulldog continued to approach closer and closer, and with its terrifying appearance, it could frighten to death any person who saw it. Suddenly, there was an explosion as the dog came closer to its owner. But this was because the dog lay on his back and wanted his beloved owner to scratch him behind the ear. The dog named Bublik was really smart because he recognized his owner and obeyed him. The joyful master continued to pet his dog and asked the dark spirit if he wanted to pet the audience. The troubled spirit did not want to participate in this and immediately refused because he was very afraid of this dog that had been to hell. In any case, it was already late. It was time for Im and the girls to move out, and Tang Feng could return to his land. At the same time, the hero himself understood that he couldn't wait to get there to deal with that freak. Sometime later, events continued to unfold in the real world, with the relatives standing over Tang Feng's body the entire time, waiting for a miracle. All this time, the scoundrel stood there gloating, because he knew that the guy had turned out to be vulnerable after all, and had died like a dog. These words angered the father, and he immediately rushed to attack in order to finish off this animal, and he would not be able to harm anyone else. The worker did not want to let him do this, and swung a huge metal bar to fight off the old man. Suddenly, someone started running towards the man with lightning speed, calling him father and trying to help him. At that very second, one of the villains was hit, and because of this, he flew several tens of meters to the side. As it turned out, it was Tang Feng, who literally emerged from the realm of the dead and came back to life. The father was amazed that his beloved son was alive, and at the same time he was incredibly happy. Tang Feng wished all the worst on this scoundrel who almost ended his life and harmed his loved ones. Zheng Longchen didn't understand why the main character didn't die, as if he had come out of the other world to get even with him. And he really did die. That cowardly and weak Tang Feng, who lacked the courage to put an end to their conflict, he really did die. But in return, the scoundrel will now receive a much more terrible Tang Feng. Because now, he is no longer afraid of death, and is ready to take revenge, because he is worth the interests of his loved ones and himself, and will not let anyone take away his home. The protagonist no longer intended to spare his enemies, but the villain didn't care, and began driving his bulldozer straight towards the guy again. The villain was not going to give up until he killed him, so he started driving again in order to crush the guy who was standing in front of him. Suddenly, Tang Feng summoned his dog, named Bublik, and a giant hellish dog appeared before the villain, ready to crush everything in its path. The stunned scoundrel was amazed by what he saw, because he did not understand what kind of monster appeared before him. The little girl immediately approached her uncle, but the boy asked her not to be afraid, because their old friend had also risen from the dead with him. After which, the brave and courageous guy asked his dog named Bublik to attack the bulldozer. The bulldozer wouldn't start again, and Zheng Longcheng was in a difficult situation because he couldn't even move. There was a very loud blow. The dog was trying to pull the scoundrel right out of the car cabin. The criminal couldn't believe his eyes. He literally begged him to spare him because he didn't expect to die exactly like that. But Tang Feng realized that the criminal had not repented. This was a really serious case, so the bagel needed to show his teeth. Opening his mouth, the bulldog really showed all his gigantic teeth, which truly frightened everyone who saw them. In front of the hellhound sat a scoundrel who really needed to be punished to the fullest extent. A loud scream rang out, and it seemed that Zheng Longcheng was finished, because he was the one screaming. Sometime later, events continued at the Zheng mansion. As it turned out, Zheng Longcheng did survive, but he became like a madman, having lost his mind, and he kept thinking about the dog he had seen earlier. When he saw him, Odette could not believe his eyes, because he wanted to understand what had happened to his grandson, and who exactly could have done this. This man turned out to be the head of the Tianlong Corporation. The man's name was Zheng Lao. He always had personal security with him, who protected him from enemies around the clock. The guard immediately noticed that the guy was really out of his mind, as if someone had really scared him. The wise man immediately asked everyone to conduct an investigation to find out where he had been last time. Because Zheng Lao wanted to destroy with his own hands the one who did this to his beloved grandson. Meanwhile, Tang Feng admired his dog, because he considered him an incredible beauty, because he was as huge as that bulldozer. But it was not entirely clear how to hide it from prying eyes, because it was impossible not to notice it. Little sister watching the dog named Bublik, she didn't understand whether it was really him, because he looked completely different from himself. It seemed that this dog was really very evil, but in his soul, he was actually extremely kind. Suddenly, something incredible began to happen, and the dog began its transformation, turning into something. In a moment, the giant hellhound turned into a cute puppy that was completely harmless in appearance. Bublik really didn't waste his time in hell because someone taught him the technique of transformation, and now he can transform. But then the hero remembered that he had to ask his sister something, and asked if any of the neighbors were going to town tomorrow. After all, he had business there tomorrow, and that damn Zheng Longcheng had destroyed his car. Suddenly the dog started running somewhere, as if it sensed something. A magical blue aura began to appear around her, as if she wanted to transform into something again. At that very second, a transformation began that was once again incredible. The innocent little dog began to take on completely new forms as she applied her transformation technique. Thus, from an innocent little dog, a huge, red, and terrifying machine emerged, which was striking in its appearance. Bublik was truly a miracle, because now he understood Tang Feng literally at a glance. From that moment, he was ready to ride into the city right on his dog. Sometime later, events continued in the city. The business partner asked Tang Feng if they would close the deal that day because he was already eager to build the farm as soon as possible. But the hero began to justify himself, although he felt very awkward, but he asked to forget about this incident. After which, the boy noticed that his granddaughter was not near her grandfather, and he wanted to know where she was. As it turned out, since they would be doing serious business today, she was not needed here. But the man wanted to introduce him to another investor. Sometime later, they gradually began to approach the office where another influential investor was located. It was the same man who is Zheng Longcheng's grandfather, namely the head of the Tianlong Corporation, Zheng Lao. The man also decided to introduce the young man as he aged and called him Tang Feng, saying that he was that famous farmer. But at the same time, the boy realized that this man was Zheng Longcheng's grandfather, although perhaps this was just a simple coincidence. Grandpa was truly glad to meet such a guy in person, because Old Man Lin had talked a lot about him, never ceasing to praise him. Tang Feng had also heard a lot about the man. It was a great honor for him to meet him. Then they decided to throw away the pleasantries and get straight to business. Since Old Man Zheng had already briefed the guy on the matter, and he had given his preliminary consent to participate, they both agreed that the botanical garden would be a very profitable project. Old Man Zheng is a real business shark. He has a very strong sense for profitable business. If he enters the project as another investor, it will add weight to their business. However, Tang Feng was not sure that this man came here only for investment. Feigning joy, the boy agreed, because one could truly only dream of such a companion, after which he asked Zheng Lao to add him as a friend. Now they became friends on a social network, and the hero could see everything about this man. At the same time, Zheng Lao was thinking that this scoundrel had robbed him of a normal grandson, and he was going to make his life a living hell so that he would beg the heavens for death. However, it seems that Old Man Lin seriously believes in this kid's business, and it is not in his interest to spoil relations with his corporation, but if the kid loses Old Man Lin's patronage, he will be left to crush the boy like a bug. Due to the fact that Zheng Lao has his own vision of the situation, he decided to invest 10 million in this project and will also hold a controlling stake in the future botanical garden. What they heard truly amazed everyone, because no one expected that such a large investment would be made in a project that was only just starting out. Even an experienced businessman was shocked, as he could never have imagined that this project could attract such a large investment at the start. Lin decided to ask Zheng Lao if he really wanted to control the project he had invited him to, because he had come up with the idea for the project and developed it, and he only planned to reap all the benefits from it. That's why the man objected. Because that's not how things are done, and he will have the controlling stake because he is already investing 20 million yuan. Zheng Lao knew that this old man was crazy. 20 million yuan for some garden was crazy, but then he shouted that he would invest 25 million yuan. Suddenly, Tang Feng decided to stop their madness so that they would not quarrel. Because he didn't want this project to become a bone of contention between their long-standing friendship, so he can personally continue to sell his products even without investors. These words amazed even more experienced businessmen because they wanted to get their profit and be in share with such an entrepreneur. One of the business sharks immediately slammed his hand on the table. He didn't understand what kind of young people these were, so he asked them to moderate their arrogance because they were offering him the deal of a lifetime. Tang Feng understood that this old dog thought that he didn't know what he wanted from him. But according to his internal newsfeed, everything had long been clear. He wanted to take the controlling stake in order to throw him out of the project after receiving the technology. And he also wanted to pin some kind of tax evasion on him. And then the guy decided to go all in and shouted that if they wanted to invest, they would have to agree to his terms. First, he estimated the potential of his technology at 100 million, and 60% of the shares would belong to him. They could enter the project for 40 million for the two of them. Either that, or there would be no deal. After some time, the men wondered if this was truly unshakable determination or if this guy was just crazy. Experienced businessmen wanted to understand what would happen if the company under his management went bankrupt. Confidently and loudly, he just said it so that everyone would believe him, because this would never happen. At that very moment, a contract was handed over to Tang Feng's table, because these were just words, and Zheng Lao wanted to know if the guy was willing to sign the price change agreement with him. The stunned hero wanted to understand what it was. The old man, in turn, asked Zheng Lao to stop doing this, because he was just a young guy, but the old man thought otherwise, because it was not worth standing up for him, and he should be responsible for his own words. And then he exclaimed that if the capital return for the first quarter is less than 300%, then they will distribute all the shares among themselves and throw him out of the project. Lin immediately exclaimed that such a return of capital was impossible and asked Tang Feng not to sign anything. But the business shark thought differently, and he talked about taking risks, because now his determination had suddenly disappeared somewhere. At that moment, Tang Feng knew that this old man was doing exactly as he had expected, and he quickly revealed his foxtail. But since this was the case, he had to act. Suddenly, Tang Feng's stomach began to rumble loudly. The men immediately realized that the boy hadn't had breakfast since morning, and it was almost lunchtime now. They could continue their conversation in the restaurant. A hidden villain named Zheng Lao wanted to drink with the protagonist and offered him to drink to the bottom. Without hesitation, he immediately began to drink, even though it was strong alcohol. The old man continued pouring him alcohol, saying that it was worth drinking while there was still such a chance, because this bottle was one of the treasures of his alcohol collection. They would clearly not pour something like this anywhere else. The hero understood that this sly fox wanted to get him drunk, so he would act preemptively. Old Lin was also told to drink, but he didn't mind. Although Zheng Lao understood that his friend usually gets drunk after 3 glasses, but there's nothing to say about this puny bunny. He got him so drunk that he would sign a product with the devil, let alone an agreement to change the price. Since the alcohol was truly incredible, Tang Feng decided to share it with his heavenly buddies. Then he sent a message telling the dear gods that he was being treated to elite alcohol, so he asked if they wanted to try it. Literally within a few seconds, a response was received from one of the gods. It turned out that it was the god of wine, Dukan, and he could not imagine that such wonderful drinks exist on Earth. But a couple of sips are not enough even to taste all the flavors. Because Tang Feng was too lazy to take a photo of the glass every time, he wanted to ask God if he had any ideas on how to make alcohol easier. It was all quite simple. The god of wine, Dukan, explained that he had a wine vessel through which he received the wine that mortals offered him as sacrifices. He would connect this vessel directly to his glass and drink the wine straight from it. In this way, it is truly guaranteed that the god of wine will taste all the nuances of alcohol. Without hesitation, the protagonist began to drink alcohol because he was going to give it to God. Because in fact, it was not he who drank this alcohol, but the god of wine Dukan himself, who enjoyed every sip. Meanwhile, Zheng Lao also drank a lot of alcohol and gradually became drunk. They all wanted to drink more, but they also wanted to know when dinner would be served. After several dozen mugs of strong alcohol, everyone was already extremely drunk. Even Lin felt that his comrades had gone too far, and he could no longer drink. Because of this, he fell on the table and immediately fell asleep, because he was incredibly drunk. Because his friend got drunk, Zheng Lao thought of him as a weakling. But the boy knew how to drink, and the old man wanted to know why he didn't get drunk. Rising from the table, Tang Feng began to talk to the old man, asking if he really tried to get him drunk, wondering why, as if he was insane and wanted to sign this agreement for robbery. Zheng Lao, flushed from the alcohol, wanted to know where he got this idea from, since everything was so good. But the main character asked me not to pretend that he doesn't know anything, because that's not true. And since he wants to play for big, Tang Feng is not averse to playing with the old man. At that moment, the hero nevertheless decided to sign this agreement, which at first glance seemed to be an agreement that would bankrupt him. Thus, the fingerprints were successfully placed and the contract was signed. But there was one condition. If he made these 300%, he would have the right to redistribute all the shares at his own discretion. Sometime later, the events continued at Zheng Lao's estate. Someone screamed in horror and smashed all the furniture that was in his path. This was an enraged old man, because in all his 40 years in business, no one had ever humiliated him like this. This kid decided that he could stand on his shoulders and do something nasty to him. The security guards were trying to reassure their boss at the same time, because the opening ceremony of the botanical garden was already next week, and Zheng Lao was going to invite a couple of strong guys there so that he would remember this day for a long time. He also decided to ask the guards to make a noise there so that people would be afraid to come close to this ceremony, and so that Tang Feng would not be able to ride over it without breaking his neck when falling from the saddle. Sometime later, the events continued in the botanical garden, under the name of the Paradise Abode. Old Man Lin sincerely hoped that under Tang Feng's management, their garden would flourish and their business would prosper. In fact, there is no need to worry, because the hero promised to increase the money they invested. Suddenly, someone started throwing tomatoes, and evidently, he was hostile. It was a few bandits who wanted to know why, there were only tomatoes here, because normal guys like meat. A moment later, a man approached and greeted the scoundrels. He explained that this was a botanical garden, and they grew vegetables, not animals, so they should help themselves, because they would definitely like these vegetables. These words clearly did not please one of the bandits, and he threw a tomato with all his might right at the polite consultant's head. And he was also ordered to shut his mouth, because no one asked him at all. Tan Feng and Lin saw the punks and called security, but the boy thought that everything was under control and there was no need to call security. Because the guy who was consulting them was completely unusual, and so he forcefully threw a tomato into the face of the scoundrel who dared to do such a thing, showing that he would not tolerate such a thing. The gang was amazed that they were being resisted, and they were curious about where this guy got his courage from. The next moment, a shower of tomatoes fell upon the bandits, as if a crowd of people were throwing them in their direction, and they were finally defeated. Meanwhile, the girl on stage addressed the dear guests. She expressed her joy at welcoming them to the botanical garden, known as the Paradise Abode, for the opening, where 20 tons of juicy tomatoes were prepared for the guests. And then they announced the opening of the first Bikini Tomato Festival. The guests were truly delighted that such a festival had begun, and their joy was indescribable. Everyone was literally jumping for joy. Everyone present started throwing tomatoes, as that was the main idea of the festival, and everyone had to make at least one throw to truly be part of it. All the guests were delighted, because they really had something to be happy about. They had never participated in such an event where they could throw so many tomatoes so actively. At this time, the hero was thinking about how amazingly convenient it was to know all of his enemies' plans, because it allowed him to always be one step ahead. His business partner, meanwhile, was confused and couldn't understand what was going on here and how some kind of tomato festival could be held. As it turns out, this is called a promotion, and a man should understand such things. There is no need to worry about losses either, because they selected the spoiled tomatoes that were not fit for sale. Firstly, they arranged a holiday for visitors. And secondly, they got rid of the defective tomatoes. And thirdly, now they will make the local news. Uncle Lin was impressed by this inventive approach and was genuinely glad to be surrounded by such skilled and resourceful people. Zheng Lao was furiously annoyed, as he did not understand how anyone could have been prepared for such an unexpected change in circumstances. And this caused him to feel genuine indignation. Even the bandits themselves were puzzled by what was happening. Every festival goer was throwing tomatoes at them, and they couldn't understand what was happening. And suddenly, something strange started happening behind one of the bandits. A crowd of people started shouting loudly in one voice. There was a real roller coaster, created especially for this tomato festival, and visitors had fun, riding it vigorously and experiencing a lot of pleasure. The bandits were furious, and it was unpleasant for them to realize that their plans had been thwarted and that they had been defeated with just tomatoes. Tang Feng was filled with joy. He realized that the festival was simply wonderful, and it was definitely worth repeating the same next time. Suddenly, he received a call from Director Liu. The guy asked him to speak louder, since the festival was very noisy and it was difficult to hear each other. It has become known that they encountered certain difficulties in connection with the arrival of representatives of sanitary supervision. The situation is developing in such a way that difficulties arose due to the appearance of employees conducting sanitary control.